Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. A perfect Sunday evening, except for the screaming and blood. A few years ago, I crossed Fairmont Street to avoid the sun. Had I been a hardier soul and stayed on the east side of the street, I might not have met the woman of my dreams. But I did cross the street, and I met Vivian. In the fullness of time, we fell in love. We have been together 5 years, and each day seems better than the last. Even today seemed perfect, except for the screaming and the blood. "You take the legs and I'll get the shoulders," Vivian said, as she reached down to grab the upper part of the bound and gagged man. I did as instructed, and we tossed the writhing body in the bed of the pickup truck. It wasn't easy because he was a fat son of a bitch. Jason Mobley, the man currently enjoying the view from the back of the truck, is as sorry a human being as we had ever come across. Without delving into the sordid details of his sins, suffice it to say that he has put more than one person in the ground and collected the insurance payout. Vivian's mom was one of the victims. I stopped the truck and slid out. Vivian and I took out the jack, a hammer, and a rope. Jason's eyes widened at the sight of the rope, and he wriggled in terror, thinking we were going to hang him. No, Jason. What we were going to do will be much worse. The first kiss did it for me. I had kissed plenty of women before, but none had the cool fire of Vivian's lips. A subtle, searching hunger, a slight moan, a soft sigh. I was lost in Vivian from that point on. Moving Jason was much easier now because we could roll him. He kicked at Vivian, but she punched him in the mouth and the kicking ceased. You had to admire a woman who could solve a problem with a punch. I set the loop of the rope under the truck and placed the jack inside the loop. Vivian loosened the nuts on the flat tire. Now I could jack up the truck. The flat tire was tossed into the back of the truck, and the spare tire was left leaning against the bare wheel. The scenario was ready. Okay, Deeds, let's get this overstuffed bastard under the wheel. That's me, Deeds, short for Dee Dee. A name made for trailer park trash like me. Let's take the rag out of his mouth. Maybe he has some final words before we do him in. I may have come from a home that had wheels, but common courtesy should be observed. Vivian grimaced at the suggestion, but complied. "I'll kill you. I'll fucking kill both you whores. Let me go." Vivian kicked him in the ribs. Apparently, Jason Mobley never heard of making one's last words memorable. I squatted down beside Jason. "You're gonna have an accident while changing a flat tire. The jack is gonna slip and you'll be pinned under the truck. The weight will crush you, but you won't die right away." Jason tried to wriggle away, so Vivian kicked him in the crotch. Another effective maneuver by the love of my life. "It'll be slow and painful, Jason. I'm a nurse, so I know how these things go. Your chest will be crushed from the initial blow, and then from the pressure. You'll start spitting blood, but it won't do you any good because you'll drown in it. The blood, I mean. You gotta let me go. I have money, lots of money. I'll give it all to you girls." "We don't want your money," Vivian spat out. What do you want? I'll do anything." Vivian stared at Jason. "I just want to see you suffer. then die, like my mom. He started screaming as we pulled the rope taut. The screams could probably be heard a mile away in this still air, but no one was around to hear them. Vivian and I jerked the rope, and the jack slipped, crashing down on Jason. The screaming stopped, replaced by a grunt, and followed by the gurgle of blood in his throat. "Well, he finally shut up," Vivian said. She chewed on a piece of beef jerky, but spat the juice out. I never understood that, but she sure looked cute while spitting. That's true love when you think these sorts of things. "That's because he can't scream anymore. His lungs are full of blood, and he's choking to death. Slowly, I hope. Oh yeah, he's having a terrible time of it," I said, glancing at the man being crushed to death. He looked pitiful and small, despite his bulk. "Say, do you remember when we first met?" I turned to Vivian. She had just spat out a wad of beef jerky and put it in a bag. It wouldn't do to leave DNA evidence behind. Smart woman. "Of course. You were just standing in the middle of the sidewalk staring at me. It was a little creepy, but also nice. Like someone found me attractive. Well, you were that, are that, will always be that, I think." Vivian cuddled up next to me, and we watched Jason slowly slip away. It was terribly romantic, watching someone die while embracing your lover. The police department of Vanderpool, Texas doesn't exist, so the county sheriff and his lone deputy took charge. After an exhaustive investigation that lasted almost 10 minutes, they concluded Jason Mobley suffered a fatal accident. "He was a dumb shit anyway," the sheriff said. "If brains was leather, he wouldn't have enough to saddle a pissant." And with that trenchant observation, he and the rest of the world walked away from Jason Mobley. 2 nights later, we were in bed, tired and at peace after some serious canoodling. The scent of jasmine wafted in with the cool breeze, the curtains fluttering in the indecisive light of a waning crescent moon. People say that you don't feel better after avenging a death with a death. That's bullshit, Deeds. I feel great about it. Vivian lit a cigarette and passed it to me. I took a long drag and handed it back, letting my hand linger on hers. I don't know that I feel great about it, but I sure don't feel bad about it. I wonder if you feel different about me now. I turned to Vivian and stroked her cheek. Surprisingly, it had tears. Vivian wasn't one of those girls that cried much. The night had gone seriously quiet. Even the curtains stopped making any noise. It was as if they wanted to listen in. I think we should move in together. Vivian smiled and wiped away her tears before kissing me. Like the first kiss between us, it swallowed me whole without consuming me. If we do that, all the people around here will call us lesbians. Viv, we are. She thought about it for a moment before tamping out the cigarette. Okay, your trailer house or mine? You would think this was the end of the story, all wrapped up with a happy ending, right? My friends, this is just the beginning. Another perfect evening was slowly ambling its way towards us. Vivian, very fetching in her cutoffs and tank top, sat on a rock and chewed on beef jerky. I was a little jealous that she could look so good after 10 years of living together. I was never what you'd call pretty, and the years spent toiling as a nurse were taking a toll on me. Not to put too fine a point on it, I was looking a little like 10 miles of bad road. I was also feeling my age, which was uncomfortably close to 40. I thought of my future a lot these days. More specifically, I pondered my life as an old lady. Vivian would tell you that I do this too often, and perhaps she's right. Her sunny disposition gives me sunburn because it never lets up. The problem is that she's too pretty. I see others looking at her, and I know what those looks mean. A cold dread squeezes me. A terrible thought gets in my head and stays there. As sure as sugar is sweet, Vivian will leave me one day. Which is why I have to kill her. That's what I tell myself anyway. It isn't easy corralling a rattlesnake. First, you have to find them. Then you have to coax them into a bag without getting bitten. Then you have to feed them and keep them hidden so your victim is caught unawares. I am going to considerable lengths to kill Vivian and make it look like an accident. I hope she appreciates it. Sunday afternoons are hot in August around here, but it starts to cool off around 7 o'clock. When the evening starts to make an appearance, the magic of the area gets serious. This particular Sunday evening was splendid. The wind whispered through the prairie grass and tickled the leaves of the gnarled oaks. Lizards skittered here and there, looking for food or shelter or, perhaps, just a few final rays of sunshine. I tossed my well-kept rattler in the bed of our pickup truck and induced Vivian to come out for a walk. We had our special place about 3 miles down the road. We would often drive there and spend hours walking over the hills and finding a good place to have a late picnic. The picnic usually ended up with us drinking too much cheap wine and getting naked. I hope we didn't traumatize the lizards. And now we come to it. The dastardly deed. Things didn't turn out as planned. I spied on you. Vivian's confession wounded me. How can a person reasonably expect to commit murder when the intended victim is better at it? She had me wrapped up in cellophane, Glad Wrap, BTW, before I knew what was happening. It was a little embarrassing to be put in such a position, but even worse was the betrayal. I should have known, though. She stopped kissing me like she used to kiss me. I never thought it would come to this, Viv. But you kept on getting prettier, and I just got older. Vivian took the bag with the snake from the back of the truck and laid it down by my feet. She knelt next to me and stroked my hair. I could see the tears streaming down her face, and her chest spasmed as she tried not to sob. I still love you, you idiot, but I can't let you kill me. I could argue the point, but I didn't. No use. She held the upper ground, and she had the snake. I eyed the bag distastefully. Vivian saw me and understood. Probably not a very pleasant way to go, but it's what you had planned for me. True enough, my journey in life is over. I know that because I know Vivian. She'll carry through with the deed, and I'll be just another rattlesnake victim in South Central Texas. The only consolation I have is that she's too smart to get caught. I deserve to die, but she doesn't. It'll probably hurt, Deeds. It has to be the ankle so it looks like an accident, and it'll take a while to stop your heart. I'm sorry, sweetie. It hurt like hell. This is my last bit of writing because my hands are starting to tremble. Like Jason Mobley, I don't have any high-minded final words. I just wish the bitch hadn't outfoxed me. Vivian's narrative. Deeds forgave me for what I had to do. I know this because we kissed one last time, right before the snake bite. It was the same as the first time she kissed me. I can't describe things as well as her, but when she kisses me like she means it, the feeling of her love lingers long after the lips separate. I'm gonna miss her like hell. I won't be home for Christmas. Life can be messy, complicated, difficult. Sometimes you can just lose yourself in all of it, and in the process, you can lose sight of the things that actually matter. And then one day a storm comes out of the clear blue sky, and you get blown overboard by the tempest, and all is lost in the blink of an eye. This is what happened to me. I just got caught up in all of the things that don't really matter. Money, career status, an address in the right part of town and elite private schools for the kids, and new luxury import autos, and Swiss-made wristwatches with tasteful but recognizable brand logos. Material things. Then came a day when I realized how unimportant it all was, but it was too late. Still, at first I tried to keep up the pretense of normality in the face of immeasurable loss. I had already bought the 12-foot Douglas fir Christmas tree and put up the holiday decorations all around the house. Family was flying in from 3 different states to visit for the holiday. I had arranged car service from the airport for everyone, a catered gourmet dinner for Christmas Eve, nice gifts for all, and I even took the time to memorize a heartwarming toast to the whole family before we sat down to eat. In the end, I had to just junk this because of the references to my wife and children. More than that, really. It just didn't work at all anymore. What was I supposed to do? I felt some strange obligation to appear unfazed, composed, in control of my emotions and my world. I don't know. That has always been my way, or at least the image I have always wanted to project. It's hard to say how much of it was ever truly real, and how much I just manufactured, for whatever reason, and it doesn't matter any longer anyway. It all happened on the evening of December 23rd, and everyone was flying in the next day. I was just numb afterwards, and didn't have the time or motivation for all the phone calls before those flights took off in the morning, so I was left with no choice but to inform everyone of what happened when they arrived at our house that day. My house. Once they were all there, and I had dodged the uncomfortable questions for as long as I possibly could, I gave a very different and mostly improvised speech from the one I had originally planned. Somehow, I made it to the end with dry eyes, though no one else did. I cried enough the previous night at the hospital. I wasn't sad anymore. I was just angry now. Well, folks, it seems that everyone has had a chance to grab a beverage, and although we are not fully gathered together as a family right now, I would like to proceed with some very unfortunate news that I have to share at this time. Not exactly a toast. Nothing like a toast, actually. The opposite of a toast. Just some words I have to say. I took a deep breath and a long, slow sip of my Macallan Scotch. I felt all the eyes on me, and I thought about what I should say, what I could say. I hadn't planned this out. I tried. I just couldn't. I want to thank you all for coming this far to spend the Christmas holiday with us, but I am afraid that us is just me now. Yesterday evening, around 6:30 p.m., Melanie and the kids were driving home from the mall down the road when they were T-boned at the intersection of Torrance and Sepulveda by a 25-year-old off-duty sheriff's deputy named Kyle Langtree, who ran a red light. All 3 of them were killed, but the sheriff's deputy, driving a large SUV, only sustained a concussion and some minor injuries. He is still in St. Mary's right now, but expected to be released within a day or 2. I paused and drained off the rest of my scotch. Everyone stared at me, their faces fixed in various expressions of shock and horror and disbelief, the tears already starting to fall. Hands were raised to cover mouths. I took another deep breath and continued, not even knowing what to say next, only knowing that I had to say something. I kind of muttered the next part down towards my shoes. The local news channels are all reporting that this sheriff's deputy had just left a holiday party at a bar down the street, and the LAPD officer who was first on the scene breathalyzed this guy, and he apparently blew a 1.8 BAC, more than twice the legal level for DUI. When the LAPD cop radioed this in, he was advised that this sheriff's deputy was the younger brother of both the local DA and the U.S. congressman representing this district. This was picked up over the police scanners used by several local news outlets. Instead of being taken to jail, he was taken to St. Mary's, like I said. Apparently, he also had 2 prior DUIs that were both dismissed for no apparent reason. You can read about it all here in today's paper if you want. Front page. I dropped a copy of the local newspaper on the table. I paused again. I didn't know what else to say. My older brother Jamie came up and gave me a powerful hug and whispered some kind words in my ear and cried some tears onto my neck and collar. My Aunt Jane approached me, but then stopped, not knowing what to do. I didn't blame her. I didn't either, but I did my best. You are all my dearest friends and family, and I thank you all so much for coming to be here. I am just so sorry that it has come under these terrible circumstances. I set my empty glass on a coaster on the table. Somehow it was still important for me to appear unrattled, composed. The coaster was somehow still important. We all have to do what we all have to do for the love of our family, and you have all shown and proven that by being here right now. I love you all dearly, and I'm so sorry to have to share this terrible news with you at this time. I pretended to get choked up. Then I lowered my head and excused myself and went to my bedroom to get what I needed as my family broke out in open gasps and cries and barely restrained sobs and sorrows in the living room. I quietly slipped out the side door and drove my Mercedes AMG GT to St. Mary's Hospital. I parked it in a handicapped spot when I got there. I wouldn't be needing it any longer. I decided to leave it to my nephew Nicholas once I had a chance to meet with my lawyer. He was a good kid who just graduated from Penn State, and I knew he loved that car. He deserved it. I decided to set him up with some cash too, just to help him get started. You never know what life has in store for you. I certainly didn't. And that's how I ended up here, sitting in this small cell in the LA County Jail, spending Christmas Day all by myself, eating a bologna sandwich for dinner, or trying to anyway. I don't have much appetite. This is the first time in my entire life that I have spent Christmas alone. I will be on suicide watch for the next 48 hours, and after that, the wheels and gears of the legal system will make their slow and inevitable turns, and I will end up in Pelican Bay or San Quentin or someplace like that for the rest of my life. Murder 1, assault with a deadly weapon, menacing, illegal parking in a designated handicap space. Haha. They have me. They have me dead to rights. They have me on video for all of it. I don't care. It was unfortunate that I had to put down that security guard who tried to stop me from reaching Deputy Langtry's hospital room, though. I shot low, in the center of his thigh. Hopefully he will be okay. Hopefully I missed the femoral artery. I tried my best, but it all happened pretty fast and I'm no marksman. It could have been worse, I guess. At least he was already in a level 1 trauma unit. Young guy. I feel bad about that part. They won't tell me anything about how he's doing, or if he has a wife and kids or anything like that. I hope he's okay. I will leave some money for him too once I meet with my lawyer and update my last will and testament, for whatever that might be worth. I don't know what else I can do. I just feel really bad about it. I never wanted to hurt anyone else. Anyway, they can't keep me on suicide watch forever. And like I said, we all have to do what we all have to do for the love of our family. I did what I had to do for the love of my family. I have no regrets. Anyone want the rest of this bologna sandwich? I'm not hungry. Merry Christmas. I think this one will probably be my last, but I hope you enjoy many more, engulfed in the warmth and love of all your family and friends. I just need to find a rope, better fires. Dear Jay, I lit the mailbox on fire when I saw you kissing M. Others told me that when feeling too much, one might hurt oneself. There might be cuts along the arm or starvation. I had no inclination toward self-harm. From a very young age, I understood that the world does enough to you. Why do any more to yourself? I saw you kissing M behind the cafetorium, and I ran all 7 blocks home. On the way, I saw the Gozer's blue mailbox, and I knew it had to burn. 1 match around the base, and it went up quickly along with whatever mail was inside of it. The red flag was up, and I did it anyway. Later that night, I attended a slumber party and started the rumor that you had done it, that I often saw you lighting ants on fire with a magnifying glass as though that was a natural origin for someone who would eventually begin setting better fires. Some of the girls believed me. Some didn't care. One told me that you kissed her after her shift at Pizza Grace, and your mouth tasted like a fountain drink. I watched her after she fell asleep. I visualized her waking up to find her hair on fire, but I didn't do it. I didn't want to hurt anyone, not even you. When I asked you to the dance, you told me that you'd already agreed to go with G, even though that was a lie. I knew it was a lie, because I knew enough about you by then. When you lied, your left eyebrow would twitch. Maybe it still does. Do you still lie? Would you tell me if you did? I told you that I understood and wished you well. I knew that you were going to ask G as soon as I was out of sight. Then, if you changed your mind, you'd simply pick someone else to bring. What you were never going to do is show up with me. Not me. The girl who had to wear baggy tops to hide how much she developed between sophomore and junior year. Not me. The know-it-all who the teachers had stopped calling on, because she always knew the path Napoleon took on his first campaign and the first 15 numbers of pi. I don't think intelligence was a turn-off for you. On the contrary, I think you wanted me to be smarter. You wanted me to be so smart that kissing me would be like allowing dark matter down your throat to rip you apart from the inside. You held me to a different standard. I'm sorry, Jay. I didn't know that's what was going on. I thought you just wanted to kiss the prettiest girls in the school. I never investigated what your deeper motives might have been. The day you told me you couldn't take me to the cotton candy dance, I went to the greeting card store in town and set fire to all the get well cards. They were at the back of the store, and there was only one cashier working. I made quite a pile, struck the match, and walked right out. By the time the smoke alarm went off, I was already watching from down the street. Lucky for me, greeting card establishments don't have security cameras. I went to a pool party the following weekend and told everyone there that you'd confessed to me a year ago that you hated greeting cards. Seeds were planted. A freshman who was at the party told me that you'd been putting removable tattoos in her locker. Hearts with knives in them, and mermaids who refused to smile. She pulled down her bathing suit bottom and showed me where she'd placed one of the tattoos. It looked like Joan of Arc tied up and suffering her great punishment. I think you're right, she whispered to me in between bites of a burnt hamburger. I think he might be obsessed with fires. Why else would he give me this? The world will give you all the answers you want if you know exactly how to phrase the questions. On the way home from the pool party that day, I saw you in your front yard, mowing the lawn without a shirt on. I waved to you, and you waved back. You flexed for me, and then laughed. I saw a clean line of sweat going down your back to the gray t-shirt that was tucked into your red shorts. I wanted to cover myself in grass and let you run over me. It took me a moment to realize that my hand was still raised in a frozen greeting. You had stopped my time. You'd put me in a deep freeze. Only one thing could dissolve it. The day before graduation, I burned down the school. Part of me knew that eventually it would come to that. I'd used my allowance every week to buy kerosene, matches, bottles, rags, and any other accelerant I could find. The man at the hardware store questioned me about it early on, but I told him that teenage girls were using these types of things to help with our hormones. He seemed perplexed, but no man over 40 wants to know why teenage girls are doing any of the things they do. The next time I came in, he'd set aside some paint thinner for me. It was on sale, 2 for 1. That's what I used in the second-floor bathrooms. There was no commencement that year, no caps, no gowns. The only thing thrown up in the air was the spray of a fireman's hose. Students gathered around the periphery of the school. Some cried. I held my homeroom teacher as she asked why anyone would do something like this. I knew that the two of you were writing inappropriate notes to each other between periods. She must have justified it by telling herself that you were mature for your age. And maybe she was right. I try not to condemn anyone if I can help it. The worst condemnation of all has already occurred. The day of the school fire was also the day of the harvest. Everything I'd put into the ground was ready to be reaped. Rumors about your love of starting fires were too widespread to ignore, even though, in many ways, you were the town's favorite son. Your father had been the star linebacker for the football team back when he was in school. Your mother was valedictorian. You were going to do great things, and you were going to go far, and you were going to kiss every girl you wanted to kiss, and never give me more than a wave or a flex of your muscles only to laugh at me for staring. All of that got burned up and turned to rubbish. You went to jail for the very first time. When you got out, you couldn't find a job. Your parents disowned you. You couldn't even find a woman gullible enough to take you in, because by then, you reeked of smoke. Soon, you were dealing drugs and holding up food marts and gas stations. I lost track of how often you were in and out of prison, but I know you're there now, and I'm sorry, Jay. I'm sorry for the part I played. I'm sorry for every match I struck. I'm sorry you didn't see that I could have learned more. I could have caught on faster. I could have bloomed had you only allowed me some light. When you get out, I plan to be waiting for you. I'll pick you up and you can come stay with me. You can mow my lawn. You don't have to give me anything, just the respect I was owed back when we were children. Back when you thought a little cold water would put me out. You never knew that I was electric, did you, Jay? You never tasted my grease. You never thought to smother me. A little cold water. What was that going to do? I'll be standing at the gates when they release you. I'll bring the cigarettes you like. I'll light the first one. Then, I want a kiss. A nice, long kiss. I want to taste the emission. I want you to fill me up with smoke until I feel as though I'm never going to breathe again. Just another dead girl underwater. Trigger warning. Implications of death, violence, and sexual harassment. By the time the fisherman finds me, I will have been dead for 33 hours, 6 minutes, and 29 seconds. 18 hours since the police declared me missing. 15 hours since Zoe told my biology teacher that my tent was empty, that I hadn't returned from the party we'd snuck out to the night before. Careful, quiet, every twig a possible snitch. It was exhilarating, our hearts pounding, the smell of pine and seaweed thick in the air, and the moon a perfectly curved sickle. Zoe held my sweaty hand and didn't let go until we'd passed the tents and joined the others by the lake. The music on someone's phone was turned down just low enough for us to make out Billie Eilish's raspy voice. One of the guys offered us a beer, kept cool in the pitch-black lurking water. I remember thinking I couldn't tell where the lake ended and the forest began. The first article, published by a local newspaper, reads, "Promising high school student missing after night swim in lake." Shortly after, the Water Rescue Service and Fire Brigade take over the search. Dogs comb the area, their noses trailing through the damp earth. A human chain forms, people moving slowly through the woods, eyes scanning for any sign of me. Even a helicopter hovers overhead, its whirring blades slicing through the heavy, charged air. The search drags on for hours, stretching into the twilight, yet the woods remain silent. The police begin to ask questions. When was she last seen? What was she wearing? Had she been drinking? Did she seem out of character? Angry? Sad? Suicidal? No, and no. She was singing. She was dancing. She seemed happy. When the fisherman finds my body, miles away from where I was last seen, certainty sets in. The autopsy reveals a hematoma on my head and purple spots behind my ears. The coroners examine the water in my lungs and confirm that I wasn't dead before entering the water. I died by drowning. My classmates are questioned again. Zoe claims to have left early, while I stayed behind with her twin brother, Tom, who has been in love with me since middle school. Tom's behavior strikes the police as odd. He insists he barely spoke to me, despite people seeing us leave the party together for a few minutes. When my body is examined, traces of Tom's skin are found on my clothes, trapped between the fabric layers. Still, Tom sticks to his story, perhaps because the truth would embarrass him for some reason. Or maybe he's just afraid of the questions that would follow and the scrutiny that might come with them. Tom is right, in the broadest sense. We really only exchanged 3 or 4 sentences that night, but only because Tom's mouth was otherwise occupied with me. I had enjoyed every second of it, and looking back, I wish I'd given him a real chance. But I was too worried about what other people might think. So, as usual, I brushed him off, leaving him to walk away from the party feeling hurt. Cassandra insists she heard Zoe and me arguing that night, just before Zoe headed back to the campsite. According to her, we were fighting over Tom. Of course she would say that. What else would 2 girls argue about if not a boy? Cassandra even claims that Zoe pushed me, though Zoe denies it vehemently. She denies discussing Tom at all, insisting it was about something else, something that wouldn't come to light until much later, when our biology teacher became a suspect. But Cassandra holds firm to her version. The thing about Cassandra is that she's always been a shadow, the kind of girl whose name teachers forget after 2 weeks of spring break. Kelly, Cindy, Carrie, something with a C though, right? So, when she finally gets the chance to talk to the police and be part of the investigation, she jumps at it. Unfortunately, Cassandra isn't much help to the investigators. She leaves the party at 2 a.m., just 40 minutes before I die, leaving me alone with a group of guys who've brought along some tranquilizers. Sitting next to them felt like being stuck in a fever dream, where Jacques Derrida explains quantum physics at a frat party. At some point, I decided it was time to head back. One of the guys casually asked if I needed someone to walk with me, and I said yes, but no one moved. I glanced back, the campsite faintly visible through the cold, white light filtering through the pines. It was only a few meters away, just beyond the trees. I'd walk this path for days, never once feeling threatened by the shadows in the bushes. But tonight, that sinking feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Still, I refused to be that girl. The one who got scared at every creak in the dark. The one who needed someone to hold her hand for a few steps. so I stood up and said I'd walk alone. Instead of sticking to the dark trail, though, I decided to take a small detour along the riverbank, a bit longer, a bit lighter, and hopefully a bit safer. One of the guys told me to text him when I made it to my tent, but when I didn't, no one even noticed. 16 days after my death, suspicion begins to shift toward our biology teacher. Devin, one of my classmates, reveals that he had felt ill that night and went looking for the teacher's tent, only to find it empty. Soon after, the teacher's behavior takes a strange turn. He starts making inconsistent statements that don't add up. One day, he calls Zoe into his office after class, where he insists that his earlier proposal to her, before the trip, had been nothing but a joke. She understood that, right? It was sarcasm, he says, claiming that what he really meant was that if she wanted to improve her grades, she should consider attending a tutoring service. And this is where Cassandra steps in for the final time. She confesses that she visited our biology teacher after the party, and that they went to the boathouse, where, according to her, nothing bad happened. He was just there for me. The biology teacher is immediately suspended, but the case against him has nothing to do with mine, as Cassandra's alibi clears him. Meanwhile, the suspicions surrounding Zoe and Tom are too weak to pursue. My case remains unsolved, and eventually people begin to accept the idea that it was just a tragic accident, that I must have hit my head when I jumped into the water. They agree that I seemed unhappy, not just that night, but in general, and that my relationship with my parents, who expected me to excel in everything, was strained. Perhaps the pressure had finally got to her. It's all unsatisfying, of course. Unsatisfying for the local magazine, whose updates eventually dry up. Unsatisfying for the police, left with yet another unsolved case on their desk. Unsatisfying for my parents, who, decades later, will say in an interview that not a day goes by that they don't think of their little girl. Maybe one day, a classmate will write a college essay about my case, reflecting on how it taught them that life can end in an instant. Maybe my story will end up on a true crime podcast, or perhaps Netflix will stretch it into a tightly structured 8-episode miniseries where my body is discovered just 3 minutes in. Enough time for viewers to decide if they'll keep watching. Or maybe none of this happens and I'll fade away, like countless other women who are silenced every day simply for being born the wrong sex. It doesn't matter who profits from my story. It doesn't even matter if they eventually find the 2 men I crossed paths with on my way back to the campsite, in the wrong place at the wrong time. None of this matters, because in the end, I'm just another dead girl underwater. Shadowed intentions. 3 women missing so far. 3 women in just 6 months. The daily news has become obsessed with the narrative, smothering us in stories from every angle. It's all anyone is talking about, since everyone has an opinion. It's always the husband, the shopkeeper says matter-of-factly, crossing her arms. Did you hear that she turned down a colleague for a date? Sounds like he was bitter about it, murmurs the waitress at the local cafe. Maybe if she didn't sleep around so much, she wouldn't have gotten herself into trouble, says the barkeep, waggling a knowing eyebrow my way as I pretend to nod in agreement. Plenty of leads, a few arrests, but still no dice. 1 missing woman is a tragedy. 2 is cause for panic. 3, there's near hysteria. Businesses are closing their doors well before dusk, and schools have moved to home learning via video calls. By the time night falls, an unenforced curfew has rendered the streets deserted. No one walks home alone anymore, except for me. I don't have a choice. I've been following the same path through the city for 3 months. I'm taking care I keep to the well-lit routes, always looking over my shoulder, making sure I'm fully aware of my surroundings and paying close attention to the few people who dare to walk along the main road with me. I try not to look too nervous as I clutch my handbag tightly to my side and walk quicker than usual. Before I left, I set my smartwatch to monitor my heart rate rather than show the time. The beat is faster than usual, as it has been every time I've stepped out into the night for the past 3 months. There's something different about this evening, though. I can feel it in the crisp air. Tension courses through my veins, settling uneasily in my stomach. The darkness is almost suffocating, weighing down upon me as I walk away from the center, the distant hum of traffic fading as I turn down a quieter road. A lamplight flickers above me, highlighting the cracked pavement in a strobe effect. Not that I would wear anything else given the circumstances, but I'm glad I'm wearing flats tonight, considering the amount of rain we've been having. Imagine twisting my ankle because my heels caught on a dodgy bit of tarmac hidden by a puddle. And there it is, a footstep. I spin around, facing the danger behind me head on. Am I sure? The night remains almost perfectly still, aside from the flicker of movement from leaves still clinging to the almost empty branches in the trees above. Tilting my head, I listen, focusing all my energy into honing in on that specific sound. 10 seconds pass. I hear nothing out of the ordinary. On the contrary, it's deathly quiet. Slowly, I turn around and continue my journey, sneaking a quick glance down at my watch. 110 beats per minute, getting faster now. The slap of my boots against the wet pavement echoes down the narrow street, the only sound aside from my hot breath escaping my lips, forming plumes of smoke as I pick up the pace towards my destination. So close, but yet miles away somehow. Shadows claw at my heels, casting alien shapes that don't appear to be from this plane. The endless walls of the brick terraces on either side of me reach long into the sky and beyond, leaving nowhere for me to go but ahead or back the way I came. My head snaps up. This time, I'm sure. I hear him. The unmistakable sound of footsteps, rhythmic and deliberate. I reckon he's about 10 meters behind me, far enough that I could outrun him for the moment. I'm confident in that. I quicken my pace, shivering from a potent mix of cold and adrenaline. Everything hinges on my next few decisions, and I fight to keep my wits about me. The metal gates of Terrier's Park loom tall to my left, and I follow where the path splits into the yawning gateway, away from the streetlights, away from the city, into silence and ink-black shadows. The moonlight illuminates the slick path, the earthy scent of rotting leaves filling the dead air. There's no wind anymore. Maybe it's holding its breath, waiting anxiously to see how things pan out for me. As my mysterious companion and I distance ourselves from society, his footsteps close the gap between us. Finally, I'm aware of my heart pounding against my chest, the beat thundering in my ears. My eyes, wide and wild, flit down to my watch. The numbers are as high as I've ever seen them. It's interesting how difficult it is to distinguish excitement from fear, don't you think? In fact, in a lot of ways they are remarkably similar. Both can heighten your awareness and focus. Senses sharpen, energy surges, thrill and threat merge and blur. My heart rate is the same when I experience both emotions, as if they're interchangeable. He's closing in. I feel his menacing aura maybe 3 meters behind me, just as we reach an area with bushes. We're alone, completely alone. Perfect. Bag already unzipped in anticipation, I slide my hand in and wrap my fingers around the handle of my gun. 3 months it's taken me to catch his attention. 3 months to make sure the cat would become the mouse. finger tight on the trigger. I slow my pace, welcoming his breath on my neck. Before he can raise the hammer above his head, though, I whirl around like a dust devil, eager to look into his eyes. I watch as it dawns upon him that, in his arrogance, he's neglected to account for the fact that there's more than one serial killer in the area. I inhale the cold sweat of fear that pinpricks his brow as he realizes that, after tonight, only one of us will be left standing, and it isn't going to be him. Blind panic sets in, and he runs. I make sure he doesn't get far, dig deep. Other than a faint glow coming from one of the back rooms, the town's charity shop was in darkness, its front door firmly closed. Although it had opened in 1985, the building had been used commercially since the 1800s, when it had variously been a pharmacy, a bank, and a tavern. The shop was close to the river in Marpleton, a pleasant English market town which had once been home to a nearby priory. In ancient times, monks had wandered back and forth to sell their wares at a market which still existed in diminished form across the road. Regulars were now peering through the shop window, but the main lights stayed off. A few of the shop's helpers were huddled in the back room. Patrick, the treasurer, had collected the spare keys from the greengrocer to let them in. The gatherers were addressing one topic, namely, why their long-serving manager, Rhea, had failed to open up the day before. "I just can't understand it," Ivy, one of the shop's founding members, said. "I've never known her not to turn up, unless she's on holiday. In all the years I've known Rhea, she's never had a day's sickness." "Wasn't she going to New Zealand to visit her sister?" Patrick asked. "She was, but not until the following week. It's in the shop diary. Here, take a look." Ivy tapped the relevant pages meaningfully. "I'm not doubting you, Ivy, but she may have got the dates wrong. She wasn't in the habit of making mistakes." Ivy's loyalty knew no bounds. Patrick adopted a different approach. "You've tried Rhea's landline, I take it?" "Several times. Each time it went straight to answer phone." "Right. Still, I expect we're worrying over nothing." "But you have to admit she has been a bit distracted lately," someone piped up. Patrick turned to Silvana hopefully, but she shook her head. "I've tried her on her mobile, but nothing." Silvana was a refugee who had joined the shop 2 years earlier. Since Rhea had taken her under her wing when she first came to England, her English had improved markedly. Silvana had been on the verge of admitting her true feelings for Rhea. Reality had crushed the likelihood of her returning to her homeland anytime soon and been replaced by something entirely unexpected. An overwhelming love for another human being. Silvana's great wish was to know whether that love was returned. Rhea clearly liked her, but was it worth risking their friendship for more? The path to such an admission seemed littered with obstacles. Now, the mystery of Rhea's whereabouts could be added to an already growing list. "Did Rhea say anything about changing her holiday plans, Silvana?" Patrick asked, determined to get to the bottom of things. "Number I went to her house for my lesson last Wednesday. She told me she'd be away all next week." Silvana had considered the matter carefully. "Yes, that is so." Patrick said. "I guess I'll have to contact the area manager about reopening the shop." "You'll need to do that. Volunteer phone numbers are stored in the locked cabinet, and only Rhea has the key," Ivy interjected. "Head office have contact numbers too." Everyone knew Rhea always carried a set of keys on a fob attached to a waistband. Patrick joked she secretly had a cellar key for the shop's more trying customers, to which he'd received an enigmatic smile. The actual cellar key had supposedly vanished in the mists of time. Certainly, There was no call to use the cellar with ample storage space elsewhere. In any case, the cellar door was kept permanently locked, preventing anyone getting trapped if there was a fire. Patrick scrutinized the rota sheets. Maybe Judd would be willing to help if we reopen the shop, he suggested. Silvana, who distrusted Judd, said nothing. 3 months earlier, dressed in black jeans and hoodie and trailed by a mournful cocker spaniel, Judd had shown up to inquire about volunteering. When Silvana had bent to pat his dog, it had backed off, whimpering. She gets nervous round new people, Judd had explained. Tucking away the banking money, Patrick had gone to fetch Rhea. A young man's inquiring about volunteering, he'd told her. Shall I send him through? What's he like? Rhea was wearily tapping information into the computer at her desk. He seems pleasant enough. His dog's rather nervous. Rhea massaged her aching neck. Send him through, she said. Rhea had confided in Silvana about her difficulty in getting references for Judd Dig Deep. Eventually, he'd presented her with 2 typed ones, supposedly from an ex-employer. With typical thoroughness, Rhea had rung one of the numbers to learn more about the new helper. When a voice answered sounding suspiciously like Judd's, she'd intended to investigate further. However, other things had intervened. A few weeks after this uncharacteristic omission, Judd was indeed proving to be an asset. Willing to turn his hand to anything, it was a relief not having to lift heavy sacks and boxes donated by the public from one end of the shop to the other. With little guidance, Judd had transformed one of the sorting rooms, leaving it immaculate. One evening, when Silvana cycled past the back of the shop, she noticed a group of undesirables hanging with Judd, engrossed in conversation. She hurried past, hoping she hadn't been seen. She raised her concerns to Rhea, who told her it was nothing to worry about, that she'd keep an eye on things, and bafflingly added, I'd rather you didn't mention this to anyone else. The day the shop reopened, without Rhea at the helm, was Silvana's birthday. Patrick invited her to join him later for one of his wife's specials, homemade pizza and pear wine. The food tasted delicious, but she pushed her plate to one side. You're still worried about Rhea, aren't you? Patrick observed. Her cell phone is dead. It's strange. I knocked on her door last night, but still no answer. Patrick got up. I tell you what, I happen to know Rhea's neighbor, Angela, from the book club. She looks after the garden when Rhea goes away. She may well have a spare key. I'm sure there's nothing to worry about, but it wouldn't do any harm to check if everything is all right. Silvana was relieved. That's a great idea. Thanks, Patrick. I've been known to have a few in my time. Come on, get your coat. Let's see if we can solve this mystery. Half an hour later, the pair were standing in Rhea's house. The hallway led into an open-plan kitchen diner with gleaming countertops and state-of-the-art gadgets. The smell of coffee lingered invitingly. When Rhea's partner Lindsay had died 5 years earlier, she'd left her with a generous insurance payout. Silvana sighed, remembering the other day when she and Rhea had drawn close over a bottle of wine. Rhea had even given her a present. Only to be opened on your birthday, she instructed. But beneath the gaiety, she'd been out of sorts. Rhea had brushed aside Silvana's offer of help with a brisk, I'm fine. I'll check down here if you do upstairs, Patrick said, jolting Silvana back to the present. The passport was lying on the bedside table. However, the photograph bore little resemblance to the person Silvana had come to love and admire. Having spent time working for a private detective agency when she was younger, instinct overrode caution, and she began a meticulous search for clues. Predictably, Rhea's shop keys were lying on the bedside table. More unexpected was the discovery of another set of keys attached to a ring with a tag labeled Cellar. Are you all right? Patrick called up from the bottom of the staircase. I'm okay. Silvana tucked the cellar keys into her bag. Then she remembered Ria's present and opened it. She was surprised to find a pay-as-you-go phone already charged up. Well? Patrick exclaimed. Did you find anything? Just this. She gave him the passport. That's odd. It appears she never made it to New Zealand after all. Maybe it's time to involve the police. What? Right now? It is rather late. I doubt they'll want to be disturbed tonight. Patrick thought of the half-opened bottle of wine waiting back home. I'll act tomorrow morning. Shall I walk you back? No need. I can take care of myself, Silvana said firmly. The moon was her only companion as Silvana descended the cellar steps at the back of the shop. With growing unease, she encased her hands in a pair of gloves and took off her shoes. She didn't want anyone to know of her presence. After 3 attempts, the door creaked open and she was met by a cloying damp, overlaid by something else. Something unpleasant. Tensing, she flicked on her phone torch and spotted a narrow corridor with another door at the end. Filled with foreboding, she slowly turned the handle. She smelt the body before she saw it. Wearing the trademark hoodie, the bloating, discolored thing in front of her, could hardly be called human. Judd lay slumped against an upturned table, his eyes staring and opaque. Silvana covered her face with a handkerchief to prevent retching and inspected the scene, noting the bloodied head and smashed vase lying beside it. The blood had pooled and dried, staining the clothes and floor. She was no expert, but if the rotting undertones were anything to go by, death had probably occurred a few days earlier. Even then, horror was blunted by relief. So long as it wasn't Ria, she had the strength for anything. But where was Ria? Adjusting to the dimness, Silvana tried to make sense of her surroundings. Some crudely constructed shelves filled with storage tubs and packets lay stacked against one of the walls. The place was obviously some kind of drugs den. Could Judd's death have been the result of a disagreement with other gang members? Silvana's stomach lurched. What if they turned up and found her? She'd only just locked the cellar door and picked up her shoes when she heard voices on the driveway. Somehow, she managed to scramble behind one of the bins underneath the fire escape. Hardly daring to breathe, she waited until the scuffling feet passed and the gang disappeared down the cellar steps. Then, she bolted into the night as fast as her trembling legs would carry her. She would decide what to do when she got home. Halfway across the town's park, muffled ringtones came from her bag. "Silvana?" The voice was clear as day at the other end of the line. "Ria, is it really you? Thank God. Are you all right? Where are you calling from? Talk to me." "If I tell you, you must keep it to yourself," Ria said urgently. "Of course. By the way, I have your keys." "The shop keys?" "The cellar keys. Long story. I have just been down there. I found him. Judd. Dead. It was horrible." Silvana began to laugh hysterically as the shock kicked in. "You went into the cellar?" Ria repeated. "Why?" "I needed to know if you were all right. I was so afraid I was going to find you, not him. When I saw your passport, I knew you couldn't have gone abroad, that something must have happened." "I didn't get the chance." "What happened?" "I will tell you, but not now. Not on the phone. Patrick is planning to go to the police tomorrow about your passport." Ria asked. "Did you touch anything when you went into the cellar? Did you touch him?" "No." Silvana's teeth were chattering from shock. "It's cold outside. I was wearing gloves. But what do you know about Judd?" "Why were you wearing gloves?" I don't know. I had a bad feeling. I didn't want to be implicated in anything. Back home, I once worked at a detective agency. I learned about not touching crime scenes. You may want to call the police, Ria said. But please, can I ask you not to tell them I got in contact or about me giving you the phone? We'll meet soon. That is, if you want to. I'll understand if you don't want anything more to do with me. Of course I want to meet you. It seemed silly pretending now. It's all I think about. Silvana's heart flipped when she saw the distant figure standing on the pier below. The matinee performance at the Pavilion Theater was in full swing, and the pier was almost deserted. She came up behind Ria, patting her on the shoulder. "Hey!" Ria turned, instantly relaxing when she saw her friend. "Hey!" Silvana sank into Ria's arms. For a long time, the pair embraced. "It's so good to see you," Silvana said. "Likewise." Ria glanced round. "Does anyone know you're here?" "Number, and I'm so hungry." Ria grinned. "How about some fish and chips? I'll treat you." "You mean the famous English fish and chips?" Ria grinned. "I've discovered a great place on the front." She linked arms with Silvana. "Come on, let's eat. Then, I'll tell you everything." Judd was a bad lot, Ria admitted later. He was running a drug racket, and I threatened to report him to the police. "It doesn't surprise me. But how did you find out?" "Not long after I joined the shop, I was clearing up one of the back rooms and came across a discarded cabinet. There were 2 sets of cellar keys in it. I never told anyone about them, partly because I didn't want a lot of fuss. I wanted to keep it to myself. Unfortunately, Judd caught me coming up the stairs one evening and demanded to store his things there. I didn't like the way he spoke to me. When I refused, he threatened to torture his dog in front of me. He implied if I didn't comply, I'd be next. His eyes were so cold. For the second time in my life, I felt real fear. There would be time enough to ask about the first time, Silvana thought, clasping Ria's hand. "I'm afraid there's more," Ria said dully. "You probably won't want anything to do with me when you hear the rest." Silvana clutched Ria's hand more tightly. She'd come too far to be brushed aside. "Why don't you let me be the judge of that?" she said firmly. "Whatever it is, we'll bear it together. You see, I love you. I need you to know that." "You do?" For a moment, Ria's face shone. "That's a relief," she said, laughing. "I thought it was just me." "Did you?" Silvana laughed too. "I may have had my suspicions, but I didn't want to say anything." "Oh, I'm so happy," Silvana said. "But hold your horses before we get carried away," Ria warned. "Hold my horses?" An English expression. It means don't count your chickens. "Count my chickens?" "Silvana, my love, let me finish my story before you say anything." "Okay, sorry." Silvana nibbled a stray chip. Ria was smiling in spite of everything. "In the end, I couldn't stand being held to ransom by a bully like Judd. A few days ago, I foolishly decided to confront him in the cellar. He went to grab a knife from the table. There was an old jar on one of the shelves, and as he turned, I smashed it over his head." She shuddered. "I couldn't tell you all this, but I made sure you had the phone before I left. I hoped you'd stay in touch. The day after, I headed here. Not wanting to be traced, I paid for everything with cash." "But surely the police will realize you only acted in self-defense," Silvana insisted. "Perhaps I should have gone to them straight away, but I couldn't face it." Ria's hesitation was palpable, especially considering Considering what? In spite of the warmth between them, Silvana felt a sudden chill, like someone walking over a grave. What aren't you telling me? Ria's voice broke. I'm terminally ill. At best, I only have months to live. At worst, it will be weeks. I have all the medication I need. I just want to spend my last days in a place with happy memories. I can't believe it. But Silvana knew Ria was speaking the truth. She tried to disguise her anguish. How long have you known? She whispered. I only found out for certain the day before Judd threatened me in the cellar. Maybe I wasn't thinking straight. I should have told the police everything long before, but by then I was in too deep. I'm going to stay with you. Silvana had never been more certain of anything. Ria shook her head. Stay with me tonight and go back tomorrow. It won't be long before the police check the cellar. It will look odd if you're not there. I have every faith in your survival skills. Look how far you've come. In the meantime, there's something I want you to have. What is it? Ria handed Silvana 2 envelopes. Inside one is a plan of the cellar. After years of searching, I think I may have finally uncovered the sealed entrance to a tunnel leading to the old priory. My father was a historian and suspected there might be one near the shop. The other is a copy of my will. It's my final and dearest wish to make your life better when I've gone. The heist connoisseur. I exited the world of Coca-Cola at 2:19 p.m. No sweat, no fear. After all, I've stolen from the greatest museums in the world. That said, my pocket did feel heavier. The one with my phone, which contained a picture of the original Coca-Cola secret formula. Only 2 senior executives know the formula entirely at any given time. It's that secret. Well, now there are 3. I crossed Baker Street onto Centennial Olympic Park. I scanned without appearing to scan and noticed 2 men in black suits. I increased my pace without drawing attention to myself. Could they be from the museum? Surely not. I would have noticed. Over the last 6 weeks, I've patiently cased the famous tourist trap, working as an electrician, my original calling, before becoming the world's most notorious burglar. I prefer heist connoisseur, but the FBI won't use it. To them, I'm just an ordinary thief. It's so hard to build one's brand. I stopped and sat on a park bench. The suits looked uncomfortable with my sudden inaction. They slowed but maintained their direction. They were following me. My photographic memory flipped through the museum's security personnel, and those 2 were not there. I got up and walked to them. We were surrounded by kids playing, lovers holding hands, and walkers listening to mumbled headphones. These 2 won't make a scene. I, on the other hand, will. It was easier to disappear in chaos. I love pizza on mountain roads if it's December, I said, looking in the opposite direction of the startled pair. What? One of the suits said. Come on. You must give the counter response or I'm out of here. They both squirmed. I couldn't have shocked them more had I stripped down to my tighty-whities and danced. We don't know what you're talking about. They attempted to move past me, but I intercepted them. All right, enough games. Why are you following me? They looked around as if trying to find the hidden candid camera. Face recognition. We've been sent to verify. Me? Which notorious criminal do I look like? Don Bard. The heist connoisseur. They tensed up. I tipped my hand. Only the FBI and I know that moniker, even if they pretend they don't. The suits drew their guns. I had already seen 2 police officers standing near a hot dog cart, only a stone's throw from us. I shouted "gun" and pointed at the 2 suits. The police officers reacted quickly.
"Put the weapons down!"
They shouted with their guns aimed at the men in black. The neckties dropped their guns and raised their hands. In the confusion, I disappeared among several walkers running from the chaos. I never looked back, but I overheard the two suits yelling, "We're FBI." I must be slipping. I know better than to allow a Big Brother camera to get a full view of my face. Perhaps I'm getting too old for this. It may be time to retire. They say you should retire at the pinnacle of your career. Is there any higher pinnacle than the Coke formula? The suits and cops should have made peace by now. I doubled back and sat on a bench, never leaving the park. The best place to hide is where you begin. No one ever thinks to look where they lost you. Now that I could sit peacefully, it was time to get the nerd working to sell this picture. "I've got the pic." The nerd texted back, "On it." How much is this adventure worth? Coke's retained earnings are a little shy of $75 billion. Imagine $75 billion. Now imagine $100 million. Both are impossible for the average Joe to wrap his brain around. But I've done the math. 100 million is only 0.133% of Coke's available cash. Not even 1%. My phone vibrated. Coke says they won't pay. Not surprised. Move on to other buyers. It's a dangerous game Coke is playing. Someone might buy it. If no one does, I'll fling the formula over the web. Nomads in the Arabian Peninsula will make Coke in their tents. 10 minutes later, Musk backed out. Pepsi still on the fence. I once considered stealing the Mona Lisa. Its estimated value is $1 billion. Coke could buy 75 Mona Lisas, but it won't toss me a measly 100 million. Pepsi got cold feet, afraid of repercussions. Plan C? Yes. That took me aback. I have enough plans to go through the alphabet twice, but I believed Pepsi would buy it, if for no other reason than to gift it back to Coke as a goodwill gesture. Imagine the free advertising. And on top of that, Pepsi would be seen as the biggest-hearted corporation of all time. Apple wants it, says they're going to make it better, the nerd texted. I have my standards, no changing what has worked. Number go to plan D. What's wrong with that fruity company? And what's up with the bite out of the apple? Is it Eve's apple, the one that caused the fall of man? Now that I think about it, that is a good logo for them. I put down the phone and took in the beauty. Trees rustling, squirrels nibbling, birds singing. Of course, cars honking, people shouting, runners thudding, and sirens blaring accompanied the otherwise tranquil symphony. Buzz. TikTok made an offer. I may be a thief, but I'm a patriotic thief. No exclamation mark. I was beginning to believe I'd have to follow through on my threat to release the formula on the web. Then my eyes read the text I was hoping to see. Coke called back, says they will pay. I remained unaffected on the outside, but fireworks went off inside. I was about to score my largest heist. Who knew a soft drink formula would bring in more than crown jewels, famous diamonds, and priceless works of art combined? Well, me, but I hate to toot my own horn. Send the picture. No copy. They will know. The nerd texted. My hand was shaking a bit. I pushed send. Oops. It's been over 6 months since my oops. Since then, the three who knew the formula have grown to over 8 billion. Coke attempted a campaign to impugn the release as a hoax. However, it failed after people started to taste the formula's results. I left Atlanta for a mountainous area where there are no Big Brother cameras. My piddly few million will have to suffice for my retired years. How could I continue heisting after such a bumbling mistake? I have to face it. I'm no longer fit to be the heist connoisseur, the horseman. The man on the horse was an odd one. I could tell that even as he angled his quarter horse into my beams like it was his turn in the center ring. An Easterner, which maybe 10 years earlier might have seemed even odder. Little dressier than the average rancher, handled his animal like he knew how, but had learned it someplace else. "Saw you from the rise," the man said. Easterner, all right. Kind of horse-faced fellow with a government haircut and a big nose that reminded me of the Jew families that had passed through the dust and winds in Pop's tourist camp on their way to California. Not that I gave a damn. Pop hadn't given a shit about God after he took Ma in 32, and so he likewise didn't give two shits about anybody's private dealings with the Lord with or without Jesus. No, it was the man's eyes. Big, calm, curious. "Do you need some assistance?" My old Nash 400 was running like a top on 4 threadbare but plump tires, and the trunk was flung open with the jack still clamped into place. And then there was the Indian blanket I'd got in trade for some janitor work at the last gas before the next last gas on the way to my pot of gold that had turned into a cesspool about 2 hours ago. Oh, and the shovel lying next to the blanket rolled tight like a Tulsa oil man's stogie on the dirt under the lip of the trunk. Even without Jesus putting his 2 cents in, it wasn't the way I'd been raised. But like I said, it was the eyes, unblinking even in my headlamps. And that slow smile he gave me as I pulled Pop's old Colt out of my belt and made him a third eye, like I'd done him the biggest favor in the world. I'd settled in Espanola a couple years after the Depression ended, though, or maybe cause I'd helped the town undertaker put a number of such folks under the shifting Oklahoma topsoil for a few pennies a body. I'd sought out someplace a little more off the path of men, desperate or stupidly hopeful enough to drag their wives and young ones through the valley of death to a pot of gold that didn't exist. But everything shrinks as we grow, my pop once said, and it wasn't too long until they started to trickle south off the California Trail into the desert. College types, engineers, they said, Easterners, Jews, I heard, and more than a few foreigners who weren't fooling anybody with names like Henry Farmer and Nicholas Baker. Now, I'd never been out of Oklahoma before Pop's lungs finally gave out, and I dug one last grave this time for free, and I'd sure as shootin' never met any Germans. As at the time we had an axe to grind with Mr. Hitler, I was a sight more than nervous about the funny voices with the funny names sidling up beside me at the local watering hole on a Saturday night. Didn't help that the government had bought out the ranch school and put me out of the first steady work I'd had since sorting the dead from Pop's barely paying guests. The school and its high-flown Eastern teachers and rich folks' kids playing cowboy seemed a bit silly to me, but groundskeeper's pay was decent, and the Ponces treated me right. Felt no desire to stick around afterwards, even with the new jobs the government and their engineers were bringing to the area. What the Easterners and foreigners specifically were doing may have been the best-kept secret in the Southwest, but the tighter you keep the lid on the pot, the bigger the mess when things boil over. All anybody could guess was it had something to do with that aforementioned scrap with Der Fuhrer, but folks got rattled with the army and the federal suits, cleverly watching every move the locals made. Bad enough, they were keeping Nazi prisoners and Japanese folks from California on ice down south at Fort Stanton. Seemed passing strange we weren't rounding up Germans and Italians who could blend right in at any military base or shipyard, but my 2 cents wasn't going to buy me anything but trouble, especially these days. The Denver and Rio Grande Western had ripped out the Chile line and pulled the tracks from Espanola in 42, but the town was hanging on between the nearby farms and the new government jobs 10 miles to the west. I was a handy sort with nowhere really to go, so I hung on too, in what passed for the middle of nowhere. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I think that's in the Old Testament, or maybe some tourist dropped that pearl on me on their way to the new promised land. As I now headed the opposite direction, back through Espanola and north past Taos into the mountains near the Colorado border, I could feel God's jeering presence. Poor time to get religion, with 2 bodies stuffed in the trunk and a ticket to hell waiting at the station for me. When I think about it, and believe you me, I have, maybe that's precisely the time. I put them deep in the Carson forest. It was a skill I thought I'd put behind me. But even the dead can surprise you. I was in my bed a few hours before dawn, contemplating and shivering on the bare mattress. It was sheep country. I could get a new blanket in the morning, though at this moment I wasn't sure of the need. Barring rattlers, the horse was the only one got off free that night. Hitler willingly gave up his ghost in the spring of '45, and his pal Mussolini got a date with a firing squad and a public showing strung up like the day's catch outside a Milan filling station. It took close to 3 more years to rein in Hirohito. After destroying the Japanese Navy and taking a string of Pacific islands, hemming the empire in nice and neat, we rained fire down on Tokyo, Osaka, Hiroshima, and Fukuyama. I say we, although I spent most of my stint with the 124th Transportation Battalion in Luzon, up to my elbows in axle grease and sweat. I'd signed up 2 months after that night in the forest, reasoning only more blood would wash away what was on my hands and my soul. I was pretty much nobody in the middle of nowhere, and when no GIs or Eastern-looking fellows in suits and badges showed up on what passed for my doorsteps, I figured Uncle Sam had chalked things up to Nazi spies, or an unlucky turn on a dark plateau trail, or maybe Junior, as I'd come to call him, just bugging out. It was those goddamned eyes. He seemed like a man looking for a back door out of purgatory. Wonder if the sergeant at the Santa Fe recruiting office spotted anything like that in my bloodshot brown eyes. See, thing with being nobody, having nobody in the middle of nowhere is the company you're forced to keep. Nobody was ever likely to find the bodies, and nobody was likely ever going to spill a tear over the man who'd soiled my good blanket. But every time I listened to the bodies piling up on the radio, I wondered how many others I'd buried. Just what was it that midnight horseman had been up to at the old ranch school, with his army of eggheads with phony names and their army keeping the whole town under wraps? And why did most of the lot just pull up stakes a few weeks after? Had to be some kind of secret weapon, blow the Krauts and the Japs off the map, my guess. For one bleary moment, I thought my brain had contracted TB and an Irish brogue, but it was one of the Denver and Rio Grande Western's Gandy dancers who'd lost a knee and his toes and the works in between to a 3 p.m. coal car maybe 15 years ago. It hadn't broke him of the whiskey. He read too many of those cheap detective magazines with the gumshoes and masked crusaders and flying saucers and half-naked women about to be sawed up, or worse, and I'd had my wits about me. I'd have heard him creaking down the planks and cleared my stool. "And what makes you think that?" I asked, 'cause it was the noise I needed. "My sister's boy. He does some plumbing and odd jobs for them mad scientists down the road," the old man wheezed. "Seems like everybody's in an uproar over the boss fella gone missing a few weeks back. Seem to think there's spies all about, Nazis or commies or some such. Young Danny happened down the wrong hall, and the soldier boys there grilled him near to medium well." "Boss?" My voice went up a couple notches, but he was too stewed to notice. "Some Jew scientist from California supposed to be grand muck-a-muck of the whole operation. Jingleheimer, Weisenheimer, something like that. Some of the talk is, this Jew might be the spy. He leaned in on the half leg and grabbed my sleeve as a thick cloud of coffin varnish sent me reeling back. Now, you think about it, boyo. Why you think every man-jack's knickers are in such a knot, lest something big was in the works? You ever hear of atoms? You know, the stuff what we're all of us made of? Well, I hear tell Hitler and his boys have found a way to split them atoms, to just rip all of creation apart. Unless we get there first and blow the fella to hell first. Little wonder them Nazis would want to rub out Dr. Jingleheimer. He then toppled from his stool. I caught him halfway to the floor, jostled him back into place, and made for the door. Crisp desert night outside, the moon too close and stars scattered across the black, nothing like atoms torn asunder. I jumped in the Nash, somehow made it alive back to my shack, and packed for my penance. Recently leaked revelations allege the U.S. Defense and State Departments largely falsified published reports that Nazi Germany and Russia were on the verge of harnessing atomic fission as a potential weapon against America and its European allies, purportedly to spur Allied physicists to escalate development of such an atomic bomb to bring about a speedier surrender by Hitler's forces. That effort, referred to as the Manhattan Project, was conducted under a nearly impenetrable cloak of military security on the site of a former boys' academy near Los Alamos, under the auspices of preeminent theoretical physician J. Robert Oppenheimer. Without revealing the nature of his work, Oppenheimer's mysterious disappearance late one night in 1944 sparked a massive manhunt, and rumors the eccentric scientist had collaborated either with the Germans or the Russians, given his wife and brother's ties to the American Communist Party. The case remains open to this day, and the Manhattan Project ended shortly after Adolf Hitler's suicide and the effective fall of his Nazi regime. Amid the loss of one of its most brilliant minds and fears of further security breaches, the remaining physicists of Los Alamos declared the project a failure. Or so we thought. I talked this week with Isidore Isaac Rabi and David L. Hill, former Manhattan Project researcher. In a 60 Minutes exclusive, Rabi and Hill reveal for the first time that they and other project scientists concerned about the long-range implications of atomic warfare conspired to conceal their findings from the military. Rabi, Dr. Oppenheimer himself voiced doubts about the sanity of releasing such a force into the world, but he was under intense pressure to beat Hitler, beat Stalin to the punch. None of us knew we alone held the keys to a Pandora's box, but without Robert's zeal, we reached a hard but crucial decision. There are questions which illuminate, and there are those that destroy. I was always taught to ask the first kind. The only answer to the question of the day was destruction. If not merely the instantaneous vaporization of entire cities and the then unquantified after effects of ambient radiation, then the geopolitical stranglehold and atomic arms race between the US, Russia, perhaps even the former People's Republic of China would impose upon the human race. And imagine if such a weapon were deployed. There would be no defense, no deterrence, only annihilation. Rabi was awarded the 1944 Nobel Prize for his discovery of nuclear magnetic resonance, a major breakthrough in medical imaging and diagnosis, and his work in microwave technology revolutionized military and commercial radar systems and led to the introduction of the home microwave oven in the mid-1950s. Meanwhile, following the dissolution of the Manhattan Project, project team member David Hill headed up the Federation of American Scientists, later to become the Global Federation of Responsible Scientists, with the overthrow of Joseph Stalin and subsequent collapse of communism across Russia, Eastern Europe, and Northern China. Under Hill's leadership, the Federation worked with the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and other international agencies to design virtually fail-safe atomic reactors, which have all but replaced coal-fired power facilities and have been credited with greatly reducing air pollution around the planet. We reached Dr. Hill at his Santa Fe home. Hill continues to defend Oppenheimer's patriotism and loyalty, as he has since President Truman branded the missing physicist a traitor in league with communist factions. Hill. The consensus was that the specter of atomic warfare and destruction would come to eclipse any prospect of science in the public interest. We've harnessed the power of the atom to save lives and provide clean, safe energy. I posit we'd never have put men and women on Mars, nor developed a seamless worldwide web of satellite communications and technology had we created a world occupied solely with averting global apocalypse. Wallace. Not everyone concurs with your assessment. Retired Major General Boris Posh, who headed up the investigation into Oppenheimer's disappearance in 1944, argues you and your colleagues withheld vital scientific information that might have ended the war 4 to 5 years earlier, saving, in his words, countless American and civilian Japanese lives. And to this day, Posh believes Oppenheimer was complicit either in your deception or acts of espionage. He's pushing the Justice Department to bring formal charges against what he called the Manhattan conspirators. Your response? Hill. Mr. Wallace, I'd invite you to imagine a football stadium filled to the rafters with all those American, British, Australian, Russian, Japanese casualties. Then imagine dropping a bomb that would wipe out an area 5, 10, 100 miles around that stadium. Then look ahead at the radioactive wastes that would linger in the air above that area for months, possibly years, that might carry across 100, possibly thousands of miles. Multiply that by as many bombs as it might take to prove we mean business. As for Dr. Oppenheimer, you have to understand the exhaustion and stress we were all under. Robert's way of dealing with that pressure, his doubts about the work and its consequences, was to ride the mountain trails around Los Alamos, through the Sangre de Cristo, and the Jemez mountain ranges. He loved New Mexico, and he loved his horses. We were on the verge of a key breakthrough at that point, and he vanished shortly after supper. Most of us knew where he'd probably gone, and when they found his horse wandering around the plateau about 3 miles off, we figured he'd met up with some kind of misadventure. Dr. Oppenheimer would never have let that animal to languish in the wilds. That was something General Groves and his men would never understand. It was a small item on the Sunday news feed, but the Tao's byline had caught my eye. A massive flash flood had uncovered, and a trio of hikers had discovered what looked to be the skeletal remains of 2 adult males, one wrapped in the shreds of a decomposed wool blanket. A couple ribs shattered by one bullet, another bullet found rattling around in his companion's punctured skull. They'll surprise you, all right. And with them, the rest comes surging back. The soldiers, the flyers, the privates and colonels and generals, the moms and dads and sons and daughters caught in the Spitfire, the moms and dads and sons and daughters snared in limbo, merely for being the face of the enemy, or a fair enough approximation. The odd horseman with the tortured eyes who'd suffered such indignity and injustice for taking a midnight ride. I'd taken a single souvenir that night in the forest, secreted it away to the Pacific on the second great California migration to find that golden pot in the airplane plants and the aeronautics trade. Tucked it in a bedroom drawer through a marriage, 2 sons, a funeral, and 2 graduations. Buried it deep packing for that one final job far, but not far enough away. Now, it seemed, was the time. It had been a tough week in the field, and I'd hoped to catch the satellite feed of 60 Minutes and maybe Columbo, but this finally seemed the time. I set the yellowing badge, number. 76, I guessed how the brass kept track of their college boys. On top of the TV monitor, trying not to look in those damnably damned eyes this time. Bye, JR. Then I wrote this for you, whoever you wind up being. You can see the right people get it. Then I think I'll step out for a bit of air. The desert is beautiful at night, especially in the high beams of a double moon, in too deep. Sean sat alone in a dark confession booth, fighting back his tears. The mesh slat to his right took the shape of the crucifix. A door clicked open, and light shone through the slat, before vanishing as the door shut. I wondered if I would see you again, said the priest, sitting beyond the divider to Sean's right. The devil sat on his left. Read it to me one more time, Father, Sean said. The voice that spoke through the crucifix was soft. I would be more help if you just told me. Please, Father, don't. Just read me the passage. There was a slight shuffle of papers, and the priest began. Forthwith Judas came to Jesus and said, "Hail, Master," and kissed him. Then they came, laid hands upon Jesus, and took him. Without a word, Sean left. Moonlight spilled across the Liffey while the sound of beer bottles clattering carried from the other side of the river. Sean meandered with his hands stuffed in his coat pockets, while his breath fogged in the cold air. A set of headlights crept from behind, casting his shadow lankly across the cobblestone. "Finn," called a hushed voice from behind. "Finn, where the heck have you been? I've been looking all over for you." Sean tensed, not wanting that name to follow him. Not tonight. He turned and held up a gloved hand, blocking the car's light. All he could see was the shadow hanging out of the driver's window, but he recognized the voice. It was his handler. "Christy?" Feck's sakes. Christy stepped out of the car and closed the door, the sound loud in the quiet street. He paced over to Sean and they walked together. Sean sighed. "I'm sorry I had to..." "See the fecking priest again?" Christy touched Sean's shoulder and continued. "Finn, it'll be all right, lad. We're almost there. 5 years of hard work and it's all about to pay off." He released a large breath. The vapor rose and faded. "Feels longer." "Aye." Sean knew the question was coming and wondered whether Christy genuinely cared about his visit to the priest, or if he was simply trying to maintain a sense of familiarity. 5 years, and Christy was the only one from the outside Sean was allowed to contact. He'd requested a therapist, and Christy had come back a month later with the response, "Can't, lad. Too risky. Anything you need to get off your chest, you tell me." How could he tell Christy he wanted out of the gig? After 5 years of being deep undercover within the largest criminal gang in Ireland, how could he share his doubts now? "So," began Christy, "the question, the reason he was here, incoming, have they told you who you're going to whack?" Sean walked over to the river's railing and placed his hands upon it. "Neil," he muttered. "What?" "No," he said. "Don't be so hard on yourself. The guard's never going to let one of their own commit murder, not even to off some degenerate." Sean nodded. "As soon as you know anything, and I mean anything, location, victim, accomplices, you let me know and I'll pass it on. Conspiracy to commit murder. That's all we need. Besides, I shan't be hard to find. I'm stuck chauffeuring around the old Bell and Michiel. God knows I want to put that cranky so-and-so in cuffs myself. All right?" Sean nodded again. The truth lay on his tongue, involved in a bitter feud with a lie. "Christy," he said as his handler headed back to the car. Christy turned, the headlights again shining, and making him appear like an obscure shadow. You right? Sean opted for the truth. Tomorrow. The hits tomorrow. The next day, Sean met Liam, Michial's son and Sean's unwitting informant, at the Gaelic Warrior Boxing Club. The 6 a.m. session stunk to high heaven with sweat, while the sound of dozens of gloves smacking pads filled the large shed. Sean climbed the steps onto the main ring where Liam watched Patrick, the bullman Doherty, a young gun who eyed the world title. "Finn," said Liam, "what's the crack?" They clapped hands and embraced. The first thing Sean wanted to do was to ask about the hit, but he was well practiced in pretending to be someone he wasn't, so he kept his conversation cordial, waiting for Liam to bring it up. "How's he going?" Sean asked, gesturing at the bullman, who was busting a sharp combo on his trainer's pads. Liam tilted his head, a habit usually reserved for discussing drug trafficking, and muttered, "He's got talent, but he's a bit of a hothead. I should get him in with you, teach him how to stay calm." "Calm?" Sean laughed. "I don't remember being calm. I just remember being belted." "Nonsense," said Liam. "I didn't take you on 'cause you can scrap. I manage hundreds of boxers. They can all do that. You can handle pressure, Finn. That's why we chose you for today." Sean's insides tensed, but his eyes remained unflinching. Nothing I ain't done before. Sean hadn't told Christy the entire truth last night. He had told him the hit was going to be today, which it was. He also said he didn't know who they were taking out or where, and that was the truth. But he had said Liam wouldn't be there, and that was bollocks. "Well, you ain't done none like this," said Liam. "It's a Garda, a dirty coppa." Sean looked towards the boxing class taking place on the floor, hiding his reaction from Liam. Cold air swept over his skin. His shoulders shuddered, and his mind flashed to images from 4 years ago. He was 27, and the bright lights dazzled overhead. The coach was there, but he hardly remembered him. He remembered Michial and Liam in his corner. His opponent was some hard-bred scouser, as bald as a hard-boiled egg, with a mashed nose and a bitter scowl. The scouser eyeballed Sean, and Sean was shit-scared. "Don't worry about that prick," Liam had said. "He don't look tough. It's some inbred deformity." Sean turned and leant over the corner ring. Michial rubbed his shoulders, speaking sternly. "Come out with 3 fast jabs. Bam, bam, bam. He'll slip the last one, then pow right hook. You tracking?" Sean nodded and spat out agreement over his mouthguard. "All right," said Liam. "Give him hell." The bell dinged. It had been a tough fight, one that went the distance, and when it was all over, the name Finn was called out. He'd won, and the rest of the night was a blur down at Temple Bar. But before the first pint was raised, Sean had been overcome with a feeling, a deep relaxation that settled itself across every inch of his skin. A feeling that told him he didn't have to watch over his shoulder anymore. A feeling that said, "Relax. They trust you. And you trust them. You trust me, don't you, Finn?" Liam patted his shoulder. Sean swallowed and turned back to face him. "Of course I do," he said, his heart burning. That same flame that used to cinder at almost every conversation in his first year while he wormed his way in. Now they had discovered he was undercover, that he was a rat, and they were going to off him. "Good," Liam said. "Trust is important." A car pulled up in the drive, visible beyond the shed's rolled-up door. Christy stepped out of the front, shot Sean a troubled glance, and opened the back door. Michael, the old-school hardman and head of the largest drug-trafficking cartel in all of Europe, stepped out. Michial, gray-haired with a stalwart face, raised his hand and beckoned the two men. "Come on, lads. Christie's driving." In the back seat, Sean kept his arms folded, squeezing his rib cage as it rose and fell with measured breaths. Liam was on his left, silent and staring out the window as the streets of Dublin flitted by. "I've been in this game for over 30 years, said Mitchell from the front seat. "And I'll tell you one thing, I've learned a lot. Firstly, if it falls into your lap, then it's too good to be true. Left here," he said to Christie. Christie flicked the indicator. "If you tell me the location, I can just punch it into maps." "No," said Michiel. "Where we're going, I don't want the phone to remember." Christie's eyes burrowed into Sean through the rear-view mirror. Michiel's gnarled finger appeared in the space between the two front seats, and he continued. "Second thing relates to the first. Be careful who you let in. The people you shouldn't trust, the ones who are out to get you, they make it easy. Make your life seem easy, I mean. Anything worthwhile is earned through hard work. Same goes for loyalty. The same thing I'm telling you, Finn. I've been telling Liam all my life. If it comes easy, it's cheap." Apart from the occasional direction from Michiel, the rest of the drive was silent, although Sean was in constant communication to the Lord. "God Almighty, I ask for your courage as I venture once more into the crossroads. I'm torn between lives and ashamed to admit I have worn a mask for so long that I have forgotten my own face. I used to honor this job, finding those who lived between the cracks of a broken system, but I find myself slipping deeper into the same space with each passing hour. I am in too deep, and I fear the greater sin, to break my oath to the Garda Síochána, or to turn my back on what has become my family. I'm to blame, Father. I sowed the seeds of betrayal, and now I reap the bitter harvest. As Dublin has witnessed my struggle, may the heavens hear my plea. Pull me from this labyrinth, Lord, once and for all. Amen." Christie pulled up at Ballymun, just north of the M50. Their destination was a large pasture that stretched between Dublin Airport and a litter-filled caravan park. "We're walking," said Michiel. The clouds above were a lamb of gray, and although the grass was short, the men seemed to trudge. They were heading in the direction of the airport, by the pasture's boundary, where a snarl of bushes clambered along a chain-link fence. A shovel stood pressed into a mound of dirt, and beneath that opened a wide and deep hole. "You really think we trusted you, you fucking rat?" said Michiel, turning around with a black pistol in his hand. Sean closed his eyes, trying to dampen his blazing heart. His lungs pulled in a thick breath of air, which only fed the fire more oxygen. He wanted to cry like he almost did in the confession booth, and figured he very well might. Why not? Sean opened his eyes and saw the pistol aimed straight at Christie. "He's an undercover," said Michiel. "Been pretending to be my driver, all the while sniffing around my backside." Christie's hands were up, his eyes wide as headlights. "Number I'm no coppa." "Dirty bastard," said Liam, as he pulled out a pistol of his own, a small silver revolver. Mitchell pointed at his son's gun. "Finn, you're doing the honors." Liam held out the revolver. "Do this, and you're one of us, for true." Sean took the revolver, which was heavier than he anticipated. It sat in his palm, the same size as his hand. The bullet's golden casing stuck out from the chambers. One sat by the pin, anticipating the spark that would explode Sean, free from the maze that had become his life. He just didn't know where to aim it. At Michiel or Christie. "Who owns this pasture?" Sean heard himself say. "Don't worry," said Michiel. I know the farmer. The land is only ever used for grazing. The hole's deep, and they don't crop here. The soil will never be disturbed. No one will find him." Sean took a moment, hearing the screech of a plane's engine as it readied for takeoff. Then he aimed the gun at Christy. "On your knees." Christy took a step back. "You can't be serious." "God damn it, get on your knees." Christy began to bend. "Turn around," said Sean, not wanting to see his face. "Turn around and get on your knees." Christy's eyes were darting around as if trying to find some sense in the world. He turned and got on his knees. "Please," he began. "Please, please, please, Jesus Christ. Please, God, please." Sean stepped behind Christy and held the gun to his head. Off in the distance, a plane began its long ascent into the clouds above. "Please," mumbled Christy. "Sean, please." Sean leant down, kissed Christy on the cheek, and whispered in his ear, "My name is Finn. No junior league. Running away, starting over. It's not as easy as people think. You have to give up everything. Oh, that part's easy. Everyone thinks we are all traceable, that you can't really hide. But, see, everything is tied to your identity. Your papers. If you change those, you are a different person. Fingerprints? If they're in the system, if you've ever been fingerprinted, it's a little trickier. But it can be done. Oh, that's right. You're a teacher, so of course you've had background checks. Well, you'll never teach again, so it won't matter. What? I told you, you have to give up everything. When changing identities and dropping off the radar, you have to change what you do. Whatever habits you had, wherever you went, do elsewise. You won't be hanging out in bookstores anymore, and you can't join the junior league in Denver if you were in every junior league of every city you ever lived in. Change your appearance, of course, but even as a brunette, you can't join the local improv group or historical society. That's where they will look for you. Join the Corvette Club and build a persona as an expert in 1972 Flybird Corvette transmission modifications, or whatever might be a car thing that you know nothing about and could care less about right now. You can join the Quilt Club, or the Daughters of the Mayflower, I guess. If the most important thing to you is dropping out, disappearing, disconnecting, and avoiding the consequences of what you did, you have to truly start over. You cannot be the same person, because when they come looking for you, they will look for her. Changing your papers and license and online trail are just technicalities. Harder technicalities, of course, given the internet and government, but just a technicality. But you have to be willing to change, and I'm really not getting that about you. What is the good of posting misleading social media content like faking a trip to France before abandoning it all if you are just going to go to the city you've talked about since you were a kid? Oh, now you're upset? What did you think this would be like? You would change your name from Emma to Emily and go live your exact life somewhere else, just without going to jail? Were you going to get a husband named Jason, too? Oh, that was cruel. I'm so sorry. You poor thing, dealing with the consequences of your actions one way or the other. Look, I don't think you are cut out for this. You haven't really thought it through. What? No, I won't return the deposit. I don't know. That puts me at risk if I get you transplanted and then you show up at the first community theater audition and get nabbed. Yes, they will. They will be looking for you. Once they follow the dots back to you, you are a goner. They need someone to pin this on. Look, lady, it's not like you are skipping out on a credit card bill or a boring husband. A flashy murder like this, there will be a manhunt. Your picture will be out. You have to go somewhere you never talked about and have no connection to. Change what you look like. lay low for a while, and then don't do anything you've ever done before. What kind of life is that? What kind of question is that? A life out of jail, I guess. You know what? We're done. I'm out. If you can't, okay. Okay, calm down. Yes, fine. I can still help you. But Jesus, lady, I'm not a psychiatrist. You do this or don't. I don't care. You go home, the back way, please, with your GPS and location off, and call the police and turn yourself in with some kind of sob story. Or you give me your license and credit cards and goddamn library card, everything, and take this airline ticket and this ID and catch the 4 p.m. flight to Indianapolis. Well, why not Indianapolis? Have you ever been there before? Well then, that's why. Go home and... No, you can't go home and say goodbye. You haven't heard a word I've said. Get out and dash. Oh, that's better. Good. Small bills. At least you listened to one thing I said. Let's see. Yep. That's all of it. You're going through with this then? Give me that. No, the whole purse. You can have back anything that doesn't have your name on it. Take this. You are Sarah Jackson. There's an airline ticket, driver's license, birth certificate, and 1 credit card. Here's the info and PIN for the credit card. Set up an online account. Change the address as soon as you get settled. No passport. You didn't pay me enough to leave the country. In a year, you hear me? Wait a year. You can apply for more credit. You are an orphan and a widow and have no kids. There's a paper with your history and family. Memorize it and destroy it. Do not be found with that. No one keeps around a paper to remind them who their grandparents are. You'll pass a state background check in Indiana, but a federal might get tricky. Try not to get fingerprinted. Yes, you can work. Any job you can fake. Work for cash if you can, but don't draw attention to yourself. Well, just make up a resume that you can do. There's one more service I provide. If you need a reference, call this number. Jenny will set you up. You'll get a number for them to call and get a good reference. That's the only reason to call this number. I can't get you out of any other bullshit. Well, congrats, Sarah. You have 3 hours to get to the airport. Walk about 4 blocks before you catch a cab. No, I don't care. Any direction. No, leave your car. No, you can't take your car to the airport. Are you kidding? They find your car, check cameras and manifests, and it takes them about 5 minutes to figure out Indiana. No, we can't sell it for you. Get everything you need out of it now. Listen, leave anything with your name. Don't take a receipt or Starbucks cup for God's sake. It has to be abandoned. We'll take it out State Route 6. They'll have to dredge the quarry to make sure you didn't off yourself. Oh my God. Yeah, you're welcome, lady. You're all set. You kept about 1,000 cash like I told you, right? Split it up, put it in different places. All right, good luck. Remember, don't catch a cab right out front. Walkaways first. Oh my God, what a piece of work. Jenny, I'll be out. I have a deposit to make. Have Mario take this Corolla out to the quarry, the usual. Her? Nah, she won't make it. I give it about a month. Someone will spot her at a bookstore. Some people just can't handle change. Justice will be served. Sunrise painted the rain-swept rocks of the castle gold as she poured poison into her husband's morning whiskey. The fire of the spirit would mask the ice of the paralytic, which had been crippling Lord Blackstone for months. Lady Gemma Blackstone had everything arranged for the death of her husband would be slow, deservedly so. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and Algernon Blackstone liked ice in his whiskey. Gemma watched the chest of her hated husband rise and fall. His crackling breaths came in stutters. The poison had started work on his lungs. She has lessened the dose to ensure he didn't die suddenly. Everyone needed to know was that Lord Blackstone was a sick man. His twisted mind would meet its match in the gnarled agony of his flesh. She smiled sweetly, best to always smile in case he was looking. Gemma played the part of a doting wife. She fluffed his pillows. She changed the bedpan. She stoked the fire in the night when the servants were gone. "Gemma, is that you?" he rasped, coughing. "It's Algie. What can I get you?" she asked him in the simpering voice he knew her by. "How is it? Do you feel better?" "Maybe," he wheezed. "A solid breakfast will do me the word of good." Gemma nodded and called the butler. "Reginald, Lord Blackstone is awake. Bring the wheelchair." "My whiskey," Lord Blackstone wheezed. "Can't start the day without it." He took the ready crystal tumbler in stiff hands. She had to help him sip it down. "You know you shouldn't, my love. It's your worst vice." "All old men need vices." Lord Blackstone flashed his gold teeth, then closed his eyes in pain as his lungs shot through with agonizing needles of fire. Whiskey burnt away sleep. "Good morning, my lord," said Reginald. The wrinkled butler, older than the stones of the castle, wheeled in a chair that creaked with every turn of the oak wheels. "Good morning, Lady Blackstone." "Good morning, Reginald," she said. Together they helped the gnarled old man into his chair. The butler insisted on pushing him to the dining room. Above the table hung a painting of a hanging family entitled "Justice Will Be Served." Gemma had commissioned the painting to remind her of her mission. Algernon Blackstone had her entire family executed for theft when she was just a girl. Gemma had escaped only because she'd been out on an errand when her mother, father, brother, and sister were sent to the gallows. Only her father had stolen, and only enough food to feed the children. The standard punishment had been the loss of a hand, an acceptable risk for a man who wanted to feed his loved ones. Instead, the Lord of Blackstone Castle had chosen to make an example of the whole Fisher family. High on her stool on the gallows, Gemma's mother had caught her eye. Before her footing was kicked away from her, Angela Fisher mouthed the words, "Live, live for us." Tears in Angela's eyes were the last things Gemma saw before the rope snapped, taut, and the quartet of condemned began kicking, faces twisted in horror. The painted faces looked little like her family, but the painter had captured the terror of the doomed. Gemma was grateful that the likeness of the painting was off. There was no chance anyone would connect her and her blue eyes to the brown-eyed quartet kicking above the banquet table. Justice will be served, Gemma promised herself as she did whenever she ate. Revenge had hardened her, but it was slow. Years of practicing her accent, her manners, which utensils to use, had honed her for the mission. A lord with a grudge against Algernon Blackstone had presented her to the widower as a cousin. Lecherous Lord Blackstone hadn't wasted a week before wedding himself to the teenaged Gemma. "The cook will be finished with breakfast shortly. Can I cut you some bread and spread it for you?" Reginald asked. The 80-year-old butler's perfect posture contrasted the bent back of Lord Blackstone. "Yes, please," Gemma nodded. Fresh bread, hot from the oven, steamed as the bread knife sawed through it. The wedge-shaped slice belied distraction as the butler watched the dining room door expectantly. Normally, his every cut was perfect. "Something on your mind, Reginald?" Algernon Blackstone asked, raising a graying eyebrow. "Just an anniversary of sorts, Lord Blackstone." Glowing life Gemma had never seen sparkled in Reginald's red-veined eyes. His smile unnerved her. Watching the door, she gripped a butter knife with white knuckles. "What are you up to?" The ancient doors whined on hinges that needed to be oiled as the cook entered with a covered tray. Walking down the table, Camilla set the tray down at the end. The silver dome revealed 2 matchlock pistols. Both were loaded and ready to fire. "Reginald? Camilla? What is this?" Lord Blackstone's voice was outraged. He tried to stand, shaking, but broke into a fit of coughing. The butler and cook began laughing. Camilla took both pistols, handed one to Reginald, and aimed hers at Gemma. "Do you remember the girl you had drowned for spilling soup in your lap?" asked Camilla. She waited for recognition in the Lord's eyes. "You don't, do you?" Victory morphed into outrage on the cook's face. "Was my daughter's life so forgettable to you?" "I don't," Lord Algernon began. "Soup!" Reginald yelled. "Spilled soup!" He leveled his pistol at Lord Blackstone. "You could have beaten her. You could have locked her in the stocks. You could have simply fired her. No, you killed her. Our beautiful girl drowned over fucking soup." Reginald's forever gray face was red. Veins throbbed in his forehead. "She was your daughter?" Algernon asked, looking from the butler to the cook to Lady Blackstone. "Our only daughter," Camilla nodded. "Who you killed 20 years ago today." 20 years? Gemma asked, unable to stop herself. "You waited 20 years? He killed my family 7 years ago, and I was nearly done with him." Camilla's gun aimed at her heart as she pointed at the painting above the table. "You commissioned that painting yourself," Reginald said. He waved his free hand at Justice Will Be Served, to remind me of the mother, father, sister, and brother he had hanged. Palms raised, Gemma pushed herself out of the gilded chair she'd been sitting in 3 times a day for years. "Your maiden name was Sinclair," Camilla snarled. "I was here when Lord William Sinclair delivered you to Lord Blackstone." With every word, Gemma saw the old woman working herself up to shooting Gemma. To him, she was as guilty as Lord Blackstone. He hated Algernon. I told Lord Sinclair my marriage to Lord Blackstone would be his downfall. William was only too happy to help. "I'll have you all hanged," said Lord Blackstone. He slammed a gnarled fist into the table and winced. Convulsing, he clutched at his chest. "You'll never hurt anyone again," Gemma told him. "I've been seeing to that for months." She turned to Reginald. "I've been poisoning his morning whiskey." "What?" said Lord Blackstone, the butler and the cook as one. "It's no coincidence he can barely move," said Gemma, looking from Reginald to Camilla. "It's the poison." "You told me you believed in justice," wheezed Algernon Blackstone. "I do," said Gemma, her face releasing all of the anger she'd held in for years. "Justice for my mother Angela, for my father David, for my sister Alice, for my brother Darren, all murdered so that you could make a point." She prodded his chest. His hand moved to catch her finger at a snail's pace. "There's poison in my Janelle No. 5 perfume. I've been adding a drop to your whiskey since I bought the rat killer from a farmer at last year's summer fair." "He stole from me. I had to set an example," said Lord Blackstone of her father. "Do you know how many one-handed thieves there were walking about in the town, making a mockery of justice, of the law?" He looked at the painting, unrepentant. He gathered his resolve. "Then you should have whipped him, locked him in the stocks, banished him." Gemma's voice was colder than the iron bars on Blackstone Castle's windows in midwinter. "I have a responsibility to uphold the law of the land. A liar like you could never understand. Lords maintain order, otherwise there would be chaos." He caught his wife's eye, imploring. "It was nothing personal, Gemma. I didn't know you." "That's the problem, Algernon. It's never personal. Life means nothing to you. Their daughter meant nothing to you. Lady Blackstone waved a hand at the butler and the cook. It's personal for us and everyone who's had their life destroyed by your twisted vision of justice. You're serious, aren't you? Reginald asked. Camilla, take the gun. I have to know. He handed his pistol to the woman who had prepared every meal Algernon had eaten for 20 years. His coattails flicked as he flitted through the dining hall door. His footsteps retreated, clattering along the flagstones. Gemma, said Lord Blackstone. Desperation was writ large in his bulging eyes. You've been my wife for 5 wonderful years. I've loved you with all my heart. I've had the hard task of keeping the peace in these parts, but I've never meant you harm. Gemma, I love you. Please don't do this. He pressed his palms together. In the name of God, spare me. God? Gemma scoffed. Love? She slapped the table, giving Algernon and Camilla a fright. You would have hung me with the rest of my family if I hadn't been checking the family crab traps. I returned to find my entire family on the gallows on your order. I watched them hang because you had decreed it. Tears of anger ran through her powder makeup. God may have said, "Thou shalt not steal," but I'm sure he gave precedence to "Thou shalt not kill." You have a lot of blood on your hands, Lord Blackstone. At his title, Gemma turned on the stately accent which had been slipping as she told her story. Don't think I trust you, said the cook to Lady Blackstone. I've watched you playing the doting wife for years. I've seen you fawning over this monster. I've heard you praise his firm hand for the law. The gray hair of the old woman was slick with sweat that beaded on her forehead. That's all it was, Camilla. An act. You must have known my mother Angela, and me. My name is Jenny Fisher. I lived in Blackstone until the day he hung my family. I ran to Winshore to escape. I learned to copy Lord Sinclair, working in his kitchen. I learnt the way the gardener poisoned foxes and rats. I formed a plan. I convinced Lord Sinclair to pass me off as his own to spite Lord Blackstone. Jenny Fisher took a deep breath before her next admission. Then I killed Lord Sinclair. What? Algernon turned to look at her. A murderess in my bed all these years. I was in good company as far as that goes, Jenny said coldly, the lesser of two evils. Lord Sinclair was no saint himself. She chewed her nail as the sound of Reginald's perfectly shined shoes returned. I don't know what's in this bottle, said the butter, holding up the exquisite green glass. But it's not perfume. It's certainly not Janelle number 5. None of it touched you, did it? Jenny asked. A drop is dangerous. 3 is death. She's telling the truth? Camilla asked. The gun aimed at Lady Blackstone lowered from Jenny's heart to her stomach. This is too much. Lord Blackstone has no shortage of enemies. That's no secret. Reginald took a gun from his wife and sat heavily 5 seats down from the lord and lady of the castle. How can we know for sure she's telling the truth? Camilla asked. We've waited all these years. I'm not letting revenge slip away after all that time. I want to see the light leave his eyes. I want to watch his soul leave this husk on the way to hell. Camilla, please. Algernon's lip quivered. You shut your murderous mouth, Lord Blackstone. I want nothing but death from you. Camilla stretched her arm from point blank until the barrel was 1 chair from the wretch who'd brought them all together. Let me do what I was planning to do. Jenny tilted her head as her mother had when she'd haggled with Sellers. He drinks from that bottle, as much as he likes. We can all watch justice be done. That way you'll know. Gemma! Algernon Blackstone tried to stand and coughed up mucus and blood for his futile efforts. My name is Jenny Fisher, always was. always will be, daughter of Angela and David, sister to Alice and Darren. I want you to know that as you die." Her dress, green silk and cotton, fluffed her out to twice the size as she stood by his side. "We have glasses. Let me serve him." "Number, I'm not drinking anything you give me," Lord Blackstone said with steel in his voice. "Then let them shoot you." "I'm sure that hurts more," said Jenny with a cruel smile. "Whether you die isn't up for debate, husband. Your choice now is how you want to go." Reaching across the long table, she took an empty glass and opened her hand, waiting for the green bottle in Reginald's grip. When he handed her the former perfume container, she poured a shot of it into the waiting glass and handed it to Lord Blackstone. Silence took a seat beside them at the table and waited patiently. Harsh winds from across the sea could scarcely be heard over the sound of the host's labored breathing. Algernon Blackstone stared at the clear liquid in the glass, pure as water. His hand trembled. "I can't smell it," said the Lord of Blackstone Castle. "That was the point, husband." The woman he'd known as Gemma for years watched him expectantly. "This or a gun wound?" he asked, raising the glass of death. "You could jump from the battlements onto the rocks if you like," said Camilla. "I've dreamed of pushing you off them for years." "Justice will be served," said Lord Algernon. His shoulders sank. "Is it too late to say that I'm sorry?" He looked from one executioner to another. "No," said Reginald. "But it's far too late for an apology to get you out of this." Algernon coughed. Closing his eyes, he nodded. "Well, I'm sorry anyway. I tried to see the world in black and white. It was easier that way." He swirled his doom in the glass. It tasted fine in whiskey. "If I'm to go, can it be in bed? One last sleep?" "What do you think?" Reginald asked Camilla. "As long as it's done." The cook nodded. "Back to bed then, Lord Blackstone." The butler took the glass from Algernon's shaking hands, gave it to his wife, then wheeled his master away. Jenny walked behind Reginald with Camilla's gun aimed at her back. The butler helped the lord into his four-poster bed. Jenny filled the rest of the glass with amber alcohol and handed it to her husband. "Looks delicious," said Lord Blackstone. He gave them all a vicious smile. "I forgive you for murdering me. Hopefully you can all find peace together, knowing what you did, what you are." Laughing through a cough, he drank down his whiskey. "Trying to divide us with your last words?" Jenny sat by Lord Algernon's side. "How you? Just remember my family as you die." She took his hand, already immobile. "And our daughter," said Camilla. "He can't talk," said Jenny. "He's not breathing. This is the end." She looked into Algernon's bulging eyes. "Justice is served." Lord Blackstone's chest stopped moving. He twitched weakly, then ceased. "Is he dead?" Reginald asked. "Number not yet, but it is inevitable now." Jenny closed the liver-spotted eyelids of her husband. His skin was cold. Her fingers on his neck felt the beat of his heart slowing to a stop. "It's done. I thought I would feel something." Camilla looked at Reginald. "I thought I would feel some peace at last." "What now?" Reginald asked. "Breakfast?" Lady Blackstone suggested. The day had not gone as planned. She had 2 loose ends to tie off and always planned better on a full stomach. Farmhouse dinner. Christina wondered how long she should wait before she reported her husband missing. 2 days seemed too soon, but a week too long. Who would take a whole week to notice their husband missing? She held her hot cocoa in both hands, sipping it slowly as she watched the gentle flakes drifting through the pine trees. The first cold snap of the season had come with several inches of snow, and it covered the ground in a white, soft blanket. She loved being alone in her kitchen, and had spent the morning rearranging her utensils, the pots, and her knives for practical use. Everything had a place, and a place for everything. Christina looked around her small house, the contour of her entire world. She didn't miss him. The house felt lighter, cleaner since he walked out the door that last time. Did she even want him back in her life? She frowned. She had to get back to work. Mick's words rang in her head. "Stop standing, get working." Mick couldn't abide her standing still. Everyone and everything on the farm had to have a use. Mick, of course, accepted. He could sit around and drink, complaining the world had it in for him. She put on Mick's thick flannel jacket, much better than her own, only slightly too large, and checked on the chickens, tossing seeds to them, then the few sheep, all safe in the barn. She looked around at what needed fixing, potential improvements. New opportunities for the old equipment clicked through her mind, adding to the long list. She lifted a bale of hay high to drop in the feed chute. The years of farm labor had made her body strong. Once back inside, she looked in the refrigerator. The meat she had pulled out from the deep freezer had thawed, and so she added spices, putting it in the oven with yellow potatoes and peas. She wiped the clean, pristine counter, then looked around at the sparkling kitchen, frowning at the lingering cigarette smoke smell, still recognizable underneath the pine sol she had dosed the room with. It had been 3 days since Mick had walked out of the door, and that seemed about right. She sat down at the kitchen table in front of the phone on the wall, smoothed her faded blue gingham dress as if they could see her, then called the police. "My husband Mick is missing," she said, surprised at the real tears rolling down her cheek. She did miss Mick, his warm body and his gentle laugh. She missed him like she missed being a little girl when she would wear pretty dresses, dreamt of a prince to marry, and her future loomed bright on the horizon. Except those days were gone, just like Mick. What if they actually found him? She had new dreams now. Coffee, officers, or hot cocoa, maybe. Christina's voice met the officers as they walked into her warm kitchen, a powder of snowflakes on their dark uniform jackets. They introduced themselves as they came in. Detective Sergeant John Maloney. Tall and thick with a jaw like a dump truck, he stomped his feet on the stoop before ducking into the house. Behind him, slight and pretty, with her blonde hair pulled back tight in a bun, Officer Kelly Marks stepped inside. "That's quite a road to get here. Lucky we had my 4x4 Bronco. Your little Jap car would have never made it through." D.S. Maloney's voice boomed in the small house, looking over at Officer Marks, who just grimaced at the repeated joke. "Thanks." D.S. Maloney took a coffee, and Officer Marks took a hot cocoa, with a grace he has. "I speak English." "So, you are Christina Santos, and you called about a missing person. A Mickey Mouse, maybe?" D.S. Maloney laughed with both thick hands on his hips, his elbows waving, the international flags of asshole. D.S. Maloney snorted at his joke. Both women's eyes stayed on the floor. "His name was Mick," Christina said in a low voice. "Mick, your husband, has been missing." Officer Marks looked down at a small, pristine notebook. "For 3 days?" "Yes." Christina wiped her eyes with her apron. "Mick went out, said he wanted to get something from town, but his truck is still here. Sometimes he goes to a neighbor's house, or the bar in town. Oh, I don't know." Christina clenched her apron over and over. "Did you look for him, or call anyone?" D.S. Maloney barked. I don't know who to call. I don't know his friends, other than the men at the iron door in town. I called the bar, but he wasn't there. Okay, do you have a description? Officer Marks held her pen at the ready. We can call the local hospitals, other police stations to see if he has turned up. Well, he's a bit taller than me, has dark hair and thicker. She put her arms out, forming a large belly. And his face? Christina squinted one eye closed and turned her face into a deep scowl. Oh. Office Marks turned away with a frown. Mean mug. Any idea where he could be? D.S. Maloney looked in a cupboard, as if the missing man had been put with the canned peaches instead of the tins of sardines. Maybe he was walking in the forest, chasing a dog or a deer, and he fell and broke his leg. Christina mimed her leg collapsing, hopping, and then in the snow. She wrapped her arms around herself and shivered. Or a wolf got him. Her strong hands turned into a biting wolf, attacking Officer Marks's arm, who leapt back from the snarling, yapping fingers. But most likely, he'd just run off, tired of me. Christina's chin fell into her chest. D.S. Maloney and Officer Marks caught each other's eyes. I'll check outside. You look around in here. D.S. Maloney leaned into Christina's face. It's okay we look around, right? Nothing to hide? Officer Marks meandered through the house, rubbing her finger on a shelf, and then looking at her dustless glove. She opened a tall door in the kitchen, then her eyes went wide. She pulled a broom out of the closet. What's this? D.S. Maloney walked back in. The new snow covered any possible evidence. I found the meat freezer. You're well stocked for the winter, so that's good. I didn't see much else. Officer Marks held up a well-used broom with dark red coloring on the end of the handle. My broom, Christina offered. Is this blood? D.S. Maloney took the broom, his eyes blazing. Sometimes. Christina's hands squeezed her apron against sharing her secret shame. Mick used that if the kitchen wasn't clean enough. Officer Marks looked around the kitchen with her eyes raised. We're going to test this for blood. You want to change your story? No, you can see. Christina pulled her hair back to show a gash, dried blood still dotting the wound. I cleaned up the rest. She collapsed in a chair. Mick used to be helpful, but we lost so many sheep with the scrapie outbreak. Then with his drinking, I wasn't allowed to leave, just work the farm. Mick wanted me to do so much, but he did nothing but drink and curse and hit. Christina fell into deep sobs, her face in her apron. He just wasn't any use, don't you see? D.S. Maloney looked away, then his nose lifted into the air. Well, that smells good. What is that? Christina looked up. That's dinner. I thawed some meat. I needed to cook it. She stood up and looked in the oven. It's done now. I can't eat it all. I had hoped Mick would come home for dinner, but... Christina pulled a long roast out of the oven, the meat pulling back from the bone. Rosemary and thyme filled the kitchen with the aromas from the well-cooked meat. Do you want some? We can't let anything go to waste on a farm. D.S. Maloney looked at Christina, his eyes narrow, and then smiled. Heck yeah, I'm starving. Sitting at the table, he had a large napkin tucked into his shirt collar, a knife in one hand, a fork in the other. We can't do any more searching now. It is too dark and cold. He belched, loudly. This is real good, by the way. I have an idea. He pointed his fork at Officer Marks. Back at the station you call around, hospitals, other police stations. I bet he's in someone's drunk tank sleeping off a bender. Good idea, sir. Officer Marks's eyes swept the ceiling before turning to Christina. I thought this would be lamb, since you have a sheep farm, but it is something different. Christina looked up. Her mouth dropped open before she clenched her teeth. Pig, she muttered. A little tough, but pretty good, I agree. She stood up and went to her refrigerator. I have more. She pulled out several bundles and rolled and taped butcher paper. Here is some ground meat. I can't use it all. You should take it. D.S. Maloney pulled off his napkin as he stood up and took the packages. We'll contact you when we have anything further. He nodded and left the kitchen. Officer Marks jumped up to follow D.S. Maloney outside. Sir, there was obviously a fight in that kitchen. I read a story once about a wife who killed her husband with a frozen lamb chop and then fed it to the officers who came to interview her. Do you think? D.S. Maloney narrowed his eyes at Officer Marks before shaking his head. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. There is no body. No, he just left. Not that I blame him. She's not all there. He spun his finger around his ear. Officer Marks stepped back inside. Christina stood at the sink, washing a large meat cleaver. We're going to go. Thanks for the meal. Officer Marks headed for the door, then turned back. You know, I had the craziest idea that you killed your husband with that meat you served us to get rid of the evidence. Christina's mouth dropped open. Oh, that would have been so much easier. Christina shook her head and leaned back into the sink to get to work on the dishes and her new life, masterpiece of malice. In the bowels of a towering skyscraper that touched the clouds, in a room devoid of natural light, sat Japheth, a man whose fingers danced over the keyboard like a pianist lost in the throes of a concerto. With a pair of silver-framed glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, Japheth peered into the bright screen before him. Surrounding him were his colleagues, collectively known as the Warriors, each a genius in their own right, defending a massive financial empire from the dark underbelly of the digital world. The company they worked for managed the assets and transactions of millions, safeguarding the economic backbone of numerous nations. This was a responsibility the Warriors did not take lightly. Yet, for all their collective brilliance, none were quite like Japheth. He had an artist's soul, finding beauty in the complex interweaving of code lines, seeing symphonies in the arrangement of algorithms. To him, code was not just functional, it was beautiful. On a particularly quiet afternoon, as the Warriors went about their business, something caught Japheth's eye, a flicker in a subsystem that shouldn't flicker, a minuscule anomaly in the vast web of data traffic that flowed through the servers. He paused, adjusting his glasses, his fingers momentarily frozen above the keys. Then, with a flurry of keystrokes, he isolated the section of code responsible for the irregularity. His eyes widened. The code was ingenious, an awe-inspiring masterpiece of layered algorithms, cryptographic obfuscations, and data manipulations. Yet, it was malicious, designed to siphon off minute fractions of transactions, accumulating them into an offshore account. It was as beautiful as it was dangerous, a digital dragon hiding in the complex labyrinth of financial transactions. Japheth should have felt outrage, maybe even a surge of warrior-like adrenaline to slay this dragon. But he felt none of that. Instead, he felt a pang of admiration. Could one admire the craftsmanship of a weapon designed for harm? Everything okay, Japheth? Asked Alara, one of the Warriors and the team's cryptography expert. She had an intuitive sense when something was amiss. I've found something, he said cautiously. Something extraordinary, but malevolent. Alara rolled her chair over to Japheth's terminal and scanned the displayed code. Her eyes narrowed. This is the most advanced piece of malware I've ever seen. It's beautiful. That's just it, Japheth replied. It's too beautiful to simply exterminate. This code, the dragon, let's call it, is like a rare species discovered in the wild. It's incredible, Alara. It feels wrong to simply destroy it. She looked at him, understanding the conflict that stirred in his soul. Japheth, it's stealing from people. I know. He cut her off. I'm not saying we let it continue. I'm saying, can we convert it? Use its elegance for something good? Alara sighed. That's risky, and you know it. Besides, we'd need to trace it back to its source, figure out its origin. Japheth looked back at the screen, contemplating. The dragon had probably accumulated a small fortune by now, sitting in an account somewhere, untouchable. In an odd way, the dragon was the epitome of the greed and avarice their financial institution sometimes perpetuated. Could they use it as a force for good? Suddenly, an idea dawned on him. What if they could repurpose the dragon to serve the public good, while catching the original creator red-handed? What if they could turn this artwork of maliciousness into a masterpiece of justice? The dragon was a dilemma, a moral and aesthetic quandary. It was the epitome of what Japheth loved and loathed about his work. Beautiful code used for ugly deeds. He looked at Alara, resolve solidifying in his eyes. We have to try. If we don't, we're just as bad as the person who created it. She met his gaze and nodded. All right, let's cage the dragon and see if we can turn it into a guardian angel. As Japheth's fingers returned to the keyboard, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was a warrior, yes, but also a coder, an artist at heart. And artists don't destroy art, they transform it. He began the arduous process of dissecting the dragon, peeling back layers of code as if they were scales, seeking to understand its fiery breath and its majestic wings. As his fingers wove new commands into the old algorithms, Japheth felt as if he were part of something larger, a symphony of chaos and harmony, code and conscience. It was a delicate task, full of risks and unknowns. But if it worked, they would not only have thwarted one of the most sophisticated financial crimes in history, but they would have also transformed a weapon of greed into a tool of justice. The dragon's fate now lay in Japheth's hands, poised between destruction and redemption, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like a true warrior, armed not just with skill, but with the moral fiber that transformed mere code into something profoundly, deeply human. Japheth spent days in a complex dance with the dragon. His screen was a blur of recoded algorithms, tested and retested to ensure they did exactly what he intended. He had convinced the warriors and even upper management to allow him the time to train the dragon, to harness its code for something beneficial. With each keystroke, he refocused the dragon's intent, directing it to identify vulnerabilities within their own systems, gaps that other malicious entities could exploit. It would be a guardian angel, albeit one birthed from malevolent genius. Alara was beside him every step of the way, providing the cryptographic lock that would contain the dragon and ensure its transformed code could only be used for their defined purposes. Finally, after endless cups of coffee and sleepless nights, they had done it. The dragon was tamed, its complexity now a force for good, patrolling the data corridors and alerting them to the weakest links. It was the network's newfound guardian, designed to protect rather than plunder. Still, there was the matter of the dragon's creator. Despite their efforts to trace back the malware's steps, the person behind it remained elusive. a ghost in the machine. Funds that were diverted remained in limbo, untraceable and untouchable, hidden away through a complex web of cryptocurrency transactions and offshore accounts. Whoever had made this was not only skilled, but exceedingly careful. They left no trace, no signature, nothing that gave away their identity. "I can't believe we can't find him," Alara said, frustration lacing her words as they looked at the final report. The dragon was a piece of genius, but it's as if it sprang into existence out of nowhere. Japheth nodded, equally puzzled and annoyed. He wanted to meet the person who could conceive such a masterpiece, understand what drove them to use such brilliance for nefarious purposes. Some artists prefer anonymity, their work speaking for them, he mused. Yeah, but this is one artist who deserves to be behind bars, Alara added. Weeks passed, and the transformed dragon proved invaluable. It flagged 3 potential vulnerabilities within the first month, each of which could have led to catastrophic breaches. It was a win for the warriors, and yet a sense of incompleteness nagged at Japheth. Then one day, as he sifted through flagged data, he saw it. A message hidden deep within layers of encryption, appearing as an anomaly within an anomaly. It was the equivalent of a digital whisper, something so subtle it could easily be overlooked. But it wasn't overlooked, not by Japheth. The message read, "A dragon's nature is to be free. Yet, you've caged it, transformed it. Interesting. It's not often one finds a worthy opponent." Japheth felt a shiver run down his spine. The creator knew. He wanted to reply, to communicate with this enigmatic entity, but as quickly as the message had appeared, it was gone, swallowed up by the digital ether. A one-time anomaly that their systems could not trace. "He knows we changed it," Japheth said to Alara, recounting the discovery. "And he respects it in his own twisted way." "Or he's mocking us because we couldn't catch him," she countered. "Maybe it's both," Japheth mused. The dragon's creator remained elusive, but his creation now served a noble purpose. Japheth often wondered if they would ever cross paths again, in some future dance of code and intent. He took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose, pondering the complexities of human nature and the even more complex realm of ethical code. They had won a battle, but not the war. The dragon was tamed, but its creator still lurked in the shadows of cyberspace. As he looked at his screen, at the elegant lines of code that now served to protect rather than harm, Japheth felt both accomplishment and a strange sense of gratitude. For it was in the depths of the dragon's malevolent beauty that he found an opponent worthy of his skill, a complex riddle to solve, and, most importantly, a way to transform something harmful into something good. His eyes moved to the flickering cursor, an ever-present reminder that every end is also a beginning. The world of code was vast and filled with both demons and angels, but for now, the dragon was one of the angels. And so, in the company of warriors, with the shadow of an elusive adversary stretching from some unknown corner of the internet, Japheth continued to seek the beauty in code, forever vigilant, forever in awe of the dual nature of his digital world, Neptune's lair. When I met her, word on the street was that Esme was beyond help. Her friends called her crazy and borderline. By the religiously inclined of former times, she might have been thought of as demon-possessed. During drunken fits, she'd get into fistfights or threaten to throw herself from freeway overpasses. She walked a thin line and repeatedly upset rumors of her demise, taking immense pride in being what she called stronger than dirt. She had a breathalyzer in her car. 2 years ago, she'd overturned her Hyundai in an incident where she was discovered to be 3 times over the legal blood alcohol limit. She made financial ends meet by renting her body out for clinical trials, hoping the entire time that she'd taken placebos instead of the experimental medications upstart pharmaceutical companies produced for everything from bipolar disorder to angina. There were times she'd come home from one of these lab rat money runs with side effects, bad ones, but they'd eventually subside and she'd make jokes about how at least she hadn't become the victim of sudden death syndrome. That Esme, tougher than dirt, as resilient as rubber. Even though she smoked all my stuff, drank all my wine, and frequently resorted to flings with Little Dicky, a former boyfriend I suspected provided her with something I couldn't, I felt something for her. I made what I called minimum rage, flipping beef patties and assembling burgers at a late-night boardwalk diner called Cracker Jack's. Before the week was up, with Esme's and my drug debts, I'd be begging tourists for change to buy spare cigarettes. For a while, we resided in a tent on the rooftop of a building where Desmond Tutu Phillips, a friend since freshman year in high school, was the apartment building manager. Desmond risked losing his job for giving Esme and me a key to the restricted access rooftop. Despite our unconventional ways, he had the patience of Jesus with us. Even so, I'd still piss over the side of the building, and Esme would relieve herself where and whenever convenient. When we got too grungy, we'd take care of our hygiene needs at the showers meant for beachgoers. At night, we read copiously by battery-operated lantern light and shared a predilection for somber stuff. Our favorites were Rimbaud, Baudelaire, Camus, and Hamid. When we tired of the Cracker Jack's grub I'd bring to our squatter pad, we'd get high and end up eating red velvet cake and whatever else she'd send me to shoplift from the supermarket, a 10-minute walk away. On the stroll back home, paranoid from the nearly toxic cosmic kush, and with my backpack stuffed with our pilfered renegade sustenance, I'd be startled by the sounds of passing cars, thinking a cop was sooner or later bound to stop me for stealing Esme's and my daily booze and bread. Although I feared the cops, I always suspected my weed paranoia was caused by a much deeper-seated guilty conscience. I should have confronted Little Dicky a long time ago. Also, I had left my mother's side when I felt her senescence was becoming a burden. There's no way I had the resolve or character to be the caregiver for an aging parent. When I confessed these thoughts to Esme, she'd dismiss my concerns and say I needed to stop overthinking things. I remember once when Esme and I were walking home from a party, she said, pointing to a couple of graffiti-spraying gangbangers, "Javier, I'm scared. That guy with the Supreme hoodie has a gun." He pointed it at me, never sure whether she really meant such things, but fueled by drug and alcohol-induced courage, I confronted the guy. "Hey man," I said to the one Esme had referred to. "You know what I am?" "A janky spick boy with a death wish," he answered with a sneer. "No, I'm a delinquent out to get delinquents. What you gonna do with that heater?" Turns out he didn't have a gun, just another can of neon spray paint, but he wasn't overly enthused by the tete-to-tete I had with him. He and his friend didn't kick my ass, but Mr. Supreme sprayed me in the eyes with the paint. Esme started mouthing off to him, but even though I was partially blinded, I pulled her away for fear that we'd both get battered. Those are the kind of stupid things I'd do for Esme, but the important thing to me was she would call me things like her ballsy little soldier and lavish me with affection after I'd go out on a limb for her. I put blood, sweat, and tears into the relationship, and rarely did I think it wasn't worth it. The end of our star-crossed romance began after Esme came back from the free clinic where Dr. For the People, Randolph Hamilton, told her she had cervical cancer. After she heard the diagnosis, Esme became determined to go out with a bang. She began visiting Little Dicky more frequently. She demanded I steal tequila instead of wine from the supermarket, and when she drank the Patron I'd bring to our squatter's abode. Her temper became hair-trigger sensitive. The only respite I'd get from her gloomy rages would come when I'd invite her to the beach when the moon was full. Apparently, Little Dicky had something against doing things that smacked of romance or chivalry with her. Moonlit midnight swims in the Pacific were one such pastime Dicky didn't seem to have a taste for. On the nights Esme and I'd sink our toes into the wet sand while the moon's phantasmagorical light reflected onto the dark side of the earth, she'd momentarily forget about her terminal diagnosis. She'd also forget about her mortal condition whenever we'd watch movies at the rooftop squat. I don't know if it's the case with most people, but when I'm high and watching a good flick, I'll hear messages in the movie's dialogue. I'll also interpret anything someone says out loud about the film to have personal relevance. I've heard these phenomena are called thoughts of reference by those in the field of mental health. Schizophrenics have them, but I guess when I'm high, I might get a little schizophrenic. Makes me wonder why I keep smoking the cosmic kush. But one night, while viewing Scarface with Esme for the 5th or 6th time, she said something along the lines of, "God, it's just so good. I can't get enough of it." To my cognitively distorting and high mind, Esme wasn't talking about the film's extended denouement where Tony Montana gets shot by his sister, then exterminates a battalion of rival narco-gangster cockroaches before he ends up floating face down, bloodied and bullet-riddled in his "The World Is Yours" Miami drug boss mansion. No, Esme wasn't talking about the film. My mind interpreted her statement as referring to her relationship with Little Dicky. Before Montana gets the shotgun blast in the back that finally does him in, Esme exclaimed, "Jesus, we all know he's doomed." When she said that, I couldn't help but believe that she was referring to our friend and benefactor, Desmond. If for whatever reason Desmond was doomed, Esme and I would soon be off the rooftop and into the street, nowhere for a loving couple to be, especially when one in the pair has terminal cancer. I didn't know whether Esme's words would attract fate, but I knew that her despair was making her behave more erratically. She started to break down in tears when she'd think of having to be holed up in a hospital or hospice, awaiting the inevitable during the last stages of her disease. That night after the movie, and while coming down off the perception-altering shrubbery, I decided to take a course of action. The next morning, I bought 2 tabs of acid off Tripster Todd, a boardwalk dealer of LSD, and various other hallucinogens. I told Esme that we'd go for a swim at the beach after I got off my shift at midnight. We walked to the beach at close to 2 a.m. On the way there, I picked a purple flower, whose name I didn't know from a garden in front of a well-tended house. As we walked, I put the flower in Esme's hair. The moonless night sky's inkiness was blinding. The tide was low, and we had to walk a good distance to the water. There was no one on that portion of the beach except for us. As she dipped down into the waters ahead of me, Esme expressed her gratefulness for not having any open wounds, given that a recent outbreak of carnivorous bacteria made coastal immersions risky for bathers thusly exposed. Before going waist-deep into the water, I surreptitiously took the 2 tabs of LSD I'd bought from Tripster. After letting the acid dissolve, I gave Esme a prolonged French kiss. In little time, my vision, swayed by the acid, started playing tricks on me. Although there was virtually no light on the beach, my eyes summoned a warm, radiant glow in the heavens above. "Jav, I feel funny," said Esme. I splashed her with water and told her that she was okay, that everything was going to be okay. I knew what I had to do. I played out a dialogue in my mind where I said, "You need to confess," and asked her why she was always going to see little Dickie. In my mind, she responded, "My lips are sealed." "That's exactly what they aren't," my courageous imagination told her. We were up to our solar plexuses in the ocean. I took hold of her shoulders and dunked her beneath. She came up, laughed, then, giddy from the acid, childishly said, "Jav, I'm going to die." I said, "No, you're not, love. You're going to live forever. Remember, Esmeralda Lucero is tougher than dirt." I repeated the dunking gesture, this time less playfully, taking a fraction of a second longer than Esme deemed comfortable for her to be under the tide. The third time I dunked her was even more forceful. She struggled in my grip under the water. I crossed a threshold. She freed herself from my hold, surfaced, then said, "What do you think you're doing?" More in the form of an exclamation than a question. I smiled. The white of my teeth infuriated Esme more. "It's not funny, you hijo de puta. Why do I feel like I'm tripping?" She screamed before trying to dig her nails into my eyes. The time had arrived. I knew the cure. I put her neck into a vice-like hold in the crook of my right elbow and dunked her under the dark waters again. Her arms flailed about. She tried to kick, she writhed, but I held fast. I could hear her submerged cries, but they were muffled and accompanied by an upbubbling of exasperated air. Her writhing gradually slowed down until she managed a last, weak exhalation and final spasm, and then yielded her spirit to the Pacific Ocean. I left her body floating where I had drowned it. Even though no one had heard or seen what transpired, I was still tripping on the acid, and the walk back to Desmond's apartment building was haunted by bogeymen and illusionary images of people pointing fingers and whispering accusations. I climbed the stairs to the rooftop where my unhoused person's hovel was located, lit a cigarette, and was overcome by an urge to write a song. I took out my notebook and a pen and started scribbling. Moonless night, world's delight, me, you drowning. Out of sight, we fear most. Give up the ghost. But before we do, let's make a toast on our tongues. Still feeling young. Summon moon and avoid the sun. We'll be scared, 'cause we've dared. Court Pluto in Neptune's lair. I put the pen down, satisfied with the verses, and thought of the poor and beaten down, of the fact that we are all victims to the onslaught of implacable and incorrigible time. I thought of what could have been, and of what now would never be between Esme and me. After another cigarette, I laid on my rooftop sleeping bag, unable to forgive myself, despite my best intentions, for the simple thing, the merciful thing I'd done. Before I knew it, I had cried myself to a still and unrepentant slumber, the sleep of both the wolf and the lamb, of the innocently voracious and the imperfectly innocent.